Welcome to Potter Eclipse. Today's adventure. What if Harry allied with Daphne Greengrass and took control of the Slytherin Bloc at age 11? If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. The Alliance. The boy who had killed a Dark Lord at 15 months old spent the train ride to Hogwarts reading, not the school books. Harry Potter had finished those in July. In the cupboard-shaped silence of a bedroom, the Dursleys had surrendered the way a dog surrenders a bone under protest, watching. The book open on his knees now was older, its spine cracked white, a borrowed thing called Noble Houses of the Wisengamot and Their Alliances. He had bought it in a dim shop off Diagon Alley 3 days after Hagrid had left him at the Leaky Cauldron, and he had read it the way other children read adventure stories, because to Harry it was one. Every name was a piece, every marriage was a move. Somewhere in the gaps between the lines was a war that had been paused, not ended, and a boy everyone in the magical world believed was a hero, a symbol, a sword waiting on a wall for the right hand to take it down. Harry had no intention of being anyone's sword. The compartment door slid open without a knock. He marked his place with a thumb before he looked up. A pale boy stood in the gap, flanked by 2 larger ones whose faces had the slack patience of furniture. The pale boy's chin was lifted at the precise angle of someone who had practiced lifting it. "They're saying Harry Potter's in this carriage," he said. "That's you." "It is. Draco Malfoy." The boy let the name sit in the air a moment, as though it had weight that ought to be felt. He stepped in, and the 2 larger boys arranged themselves behind him like a wall built to be admired. "You'll find some wizarding families are better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there." He held out his hand. It was a clean, manicured 11-year-old hand, and behind it stood Wiltshire, a manor, a fortune, and a father whose name Harry had read 4 times that afternoon. Lucius Malfoy, governor, signatory, survivor of a war he had publicly regretted and privately. The book implied between its careful lines had never regretted at all. Harry looked at the hand. He understood exactly what it was, not friendship. A contract offered to a child who was supposed to be lonely and grateful and stupid enough to sign whatever was put in front of him by the first confident voice that called him special. The Malfoys had read the same war he had. They had decided the symbol on the wall was worth taking down early, before anyone else thought to, and Draco had been sent to take it. "I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself," Harry said. "Thanks." The hand stayed out a beat too long. Draco's face did something complicated and badly hidden, surprise, then the heat of it, then a careful glaze laid over both. He was not used to being refused, and worse, he had not been taught what to do when it happened in front of an audience, even an audience of 2 boys too dim to count. "You'll regret that," Draco said, which was what people said when they had nothing. "Maybe." Harry returned to his book. "Close the door on your way out. There's a draft." For a moment he thought it might come to something, a hex, a shove, the stupid escalation of boys with more pride than sense. But Draco was not a fool, only young and brittle, and he could feel the audience tipping the wrong way. He turned with as much disdain as he could carry and went, and the larger boys followed, and the door slid shut on a draft that had never existed. Harry did not go back to his reading. He sat with the closed book on his knees and turned the encounter over once, looking for the part he had gotten wrong. He had made an enemy, that was the cost. But the enemy had been guaranteed the moment he'd boarded the train, because the Malfoys wanted a sword and Harry refused to be one, and there was no version of the next 7 years in which Lucius Malfoy's son and Harry Potter were friends. Better to refuse on the platform cleanly, where the refusal cost only Draco's pride, than to be slowly bought and then have to break the contract later, expensively, in front of people who would remember he had signed. What he had bought with it was information. Draco had told him 3 things without meaning to: that the Malfoys had already decided Harry was worth acquiring, that they thought 11 was the age to do it, and that their idea of acquisition was a hand on a train and a few words about the wrong sort, crude, confident, untested against anyone who pushed back. They had power. They had not in a long time had to be clever with it. That was a weakness, and Harry kept it. He looked out the window at England going green and wet and unfamiliar, and waited for the castle. The sorting was the first move he would make in front of everyone, and he had decided how to make it weeks ago in the cupboard by lamplight. The great hall was exactly as overwhelming as it was designed to be, the ceiling gone to storm-colored sky, the 4 long tables, 1,000 candles burning without wax, the weight of every face turning toward the doors. Harry walked through it without hurrying and without gawking, because both told a room you did not belong to it, and he had decided to belong to this one. He found the staff table without seeming to look for it. The old man in the center could only be Dumbledore, the beard, the half-moon glasses, the deliberate twinkle of a man who had cultivated harmlessness as carefully as some men cultivate menace. Beside him, a sallow man in black with a curtain of dark hair was watching the incoming first-years with open distaste, and his eyes found Harry and stopped, and the distaste sharpened into something hungrier and more wounded. Harry knew that look. He had read enough to guess at it. The man had loved his mother or hated his father or both, and could not look at Harry's face without paying for it. He gave the man nothing. He let his gaze pass on as though the staff table were furniture. The hat sang. Names were called. Harry studied the 4 tables for arrangement, for who leaned toward whom, for the geometry of belonging. The table under the green banners interested him most. It was the only one that did not cheer for its new members so much as appraise them. When a boy was sorted to Slytherin, the table did not roar, it noted. A house that counted instead of cheered. He had hoped for that. Potter, Harry. The hall did not gasp so much as inhale. Quills stopped. The man in black at the staff table leaned forward a half-inch he probably did not know he had given away. Harry crossed to the stool, sat, and let the hat come down over his eyes, and the world went dark and close and smelled of dust and old wool. "Well, well," said a voice inside his skull, and it was not unkind, and it was very, very old. The cosmic baroque texture of it ran under his thoughts like a current under ice, a thing that had read 1,000 years of children the way Harry read books. Difficult, oh yes, plenty of courage, I see. Bad mind, either better than you let the train see much better, a thirst to prove yourself, but this is interesting. The voice slowed. You've already chosen, haven't you? You walked in here knowing where you wanted to be put. Most don't. Most have no idea what they are. You've decided what you intend to become. Slytherin, Harry thought, clear and flat. Are you certain? Gryffindor would make you a hero. They'd love you for it. The whole world would. The road's already paved. That's why I won't take it. Someone paved it. I want to know who before I walk anywhere. The hat was quiet a long moment, and under the quiet Harry felt the ancient attention of it turn fully toward him, the way deep water turns toward a dropped stone. You understand, it said softly, that the house you're asking for will not be kind to you. They'll see the scar before they see the boy. Half will want to use you and half will want to destroy you for the sin of having survived the wizard, half of them still toast in the dark. I know. And you want it anyway. I want a house that counts, Harry thought. I'll deal with the rest. He felt the hat almost smile, a thing made of cloth and spellwork smiling. Then it had better be, it said aloud to the silent hall in the great carrying voice it used for the world, Slytherin. The silence after was the loudest thing Harry had ever heard. He took the hat off, set it on the stool, and walked into it. No table cheered. The green-bannered one did not cheer either, but it did something better than cheering. It went utterly still, every face along its length turned toward him, recalculating. He had wanted that too. He found a place on the bench among the older students, who made room without being asked, because not one of them knew yet whether he was an asset or a catastrophe, and a thing you cannot price you do not crowd. At the staff table, Dumbledore had not moved. But the twinkle had gone out of him for exactly 1 second, like a candle thumbed and relit, and Harry, watching from under his lashes, saw it go, and knew the old man had felt the sword come down off the wall and walked to the wrong side of the room. That was the second thing Harry learned that night. The headmaster had a plan for him, and the plan had just developed a crack, and Dumbledore had let Harry see, for 1 second, because he was tired or because he was old or because even great men cannot govern every muscle, exactly how much the crack cost him. Harry kept it beside the Malfoy slip, among the things the powerful did not mean to show. The Slytherin common room was underground under the lake, and the green light that came through its deep windows was the light of a world looking up at a surface it would never reach. Harry liked it immediately. It was a room that did not pretend. The fire was real, the leather was real, the cold coming off the stone was real, and the people arranged around all of it were performing a play whose script every one of them had read. He stood just inside the door and read it too. There was a center and there were orbits. The center tonight was Draco Malfoy, holding court near the fire with the 2 furniture-faced boys behind him and a sharp-faced girl at his elbow who laughed a half-second before his jokes were funny. Around them, in a loose ring, the children of the families Harry had read about, Parkinson, Bulstrode, the Carrow cousins, faces he could put names to from a book bought in a dim shop. They were the loud part of the house, the part that thought it was the whole. It was not. Harry could see the rest already, the students who had not joined the ring, who sat at the edges with books or in pairs and watched the center the way the center never thought to watch them. The neutral houses, the gray ones, the ones whose fathers had survived the last war by belonging to no one, and who had taught their children that belonging to no one was a skill, not a failure. One of them was watching the room better than Harry was. She sat alone at a long table near the green windows, a tall girl with cool fair hair and a book she was not reading because her eyes were on the firing and her face was doing the arithmetic Harry's was doing. She had clocked the center, the orbits, the edges. She had clocked him standing in the door reading the same things, and when she felt him notice her noticing, she did not look away the way the others would have. She held it 1 cool beat and then returned to her book as if to say, yes, and Harry crossed the room and sat down across from her without being invited. You're in my light, she said, not looking up. There are 4 other windows. I like this one. She turned a page she had not read. You're the Potter who got himself put in the wrong house. The whole school's going to be talking about it by breakfast. It's the right house, they just don't know why yet. That earned him a glance, the first real one, level and gray and entirely without the awe he had spent the evening declining from everyone else. And you're going to tell me, Daphne Greengrass, Harry said. He had read the name. House Greengrass, old, neutral, rich in the quiet way that does not need to announce itself, sat out the last war and the one before it, married carefully, owed no one and was owed by half. The book had a phrase for the Greengrass doctrine that he had liked enough to memorize. Your family has a saying, bend to no king. Now she put the book down. We don't print that on the stationery. No, but it's why your father's still alive and Crouch's isn't, and Rosier's isn't, and half the names in the loud corner over there have a dead grandfather and a manor with a mortgage on it the ministry pretends not to see. Harry kept his voice low and even, pitched to carry no further than the table. 2 wizards fought a war over this country. One of them's dead and one of them's pretending to twinkle at the staff table, and both of them think it's their war, their board, their pieces. Everyone in that firing thinks so too. They're already choosing a side or having one chosen for them by a father with a mark on his arm. He let that land. Your family looked at both kings and decided not to kneel. I think that's the only intelligent thing anyone in this castle has done in 50 years. Daphne Greengrass did not answer for a moment. The fire popped in the grate. Across the room, Draco's laughter went up too loud, performing for a Harry who was not watching it. You've thought about this a great deal, she said finally, for someone who got off the train this afternoon. I've thought about nothing else for 2 months. There's a war coming back. Everyone in this room is going to be made into someone's soldier, and most of them won't even feel it happen. They'll think it was their idea. Harry leaned in very slightly. I'm not going to be a soldier. Not Dumbledore's, not the other ones. I'm going to be a player. And to be a player in this house, you need the house, and to take this house, you can't do it alone, because a snake on its own is just a thing people are afraid of until they get a shovel. He met her eyes. You're the only person I've seen tonight who's reading the room instead of decorating it. I'd like to propose an arrangement. An arrangement. Her mouth did something dry that was not quite a smile, not a friendship. Friendships break and leave you embarrassed. Arrangements have terms. You honor terms or you don't, and either way you both know where you stand. He spread his hands empty. I'm not offering you a place behind me. Malfoy's offering places behind him. Go look, I'm offering you a place beside me. Equal. We take this house together and we hold it together, and neither of us is the other's lieutenant. Equal, she repeated, tasting it for poison. The boy who lived wants to be equals with a neutral house's daughter nobody outside the Wisengamot has heard of. The boy who lived is a story other people tell to make me useful to them. I'm not interested in the story. I'm interested in what you can actually do, which is read a room better than anyone in it, come from a family that stayed alive by being smarter than louder men, and walk up to the most dangerous person in the dungeon, which tonight is me, whatever the firing thinks, and tell him he's in your light. Harry let himself, for the first time all night, show something true, not warmth exactly, but the clean respect of one careful person for another. I don't want a follower. Followers tell you what you want to hear and you go blind. I want someone who will tell me when I'm wrong, loudly, at the table, before it costs us. Daphne was quiet again, but it was a different quiet now, a working one. She had the look of someone turning over the same encounter once, looking for the part she'd gotten wrong, and Harry understood with a cold flicker of pleasure that he had found, in the first night, the rarest thing in the dungeon. A mind that did the same arithmetic as did. Terms, she said, name them. 1, she held up a finger. Equal means equal, not equal until it's inconvenient. If you ever start treating me like the help, the arrangement's over and I take everything I know about it to whoever pays best. I want you to know that going in so you never get the idea I'm sentimental. Agreed, I'd think less of you if you didn't. 2, transparency of aims. I'm not playing a game where I find out your real goal in 4th year and discover I've been building towards something I'd never have signed for. You tell me what you actually want out of this. Now, the true thing, not the speech. Harry looked at her across the table, and the green light from the lake window lay over both of them, and he decided that the arrangement was worth more than the secret. I want to survive a war that 2 grown wizards are going to fight over my head, he said quietly. I want to come out the other side of it owning enough of the board that neither of the winners can touch me, and I want to do it without becoming either of them, without deciding that because I'm clever I get to use people the way they both used my parents. He paused. That last part's the hard one. I'll need someone to tell me when I'm failing it. That's the other reason it's you. Something moved behind the gray of her eyes there and gone, one beat, stated once. He did not soften. Greengrasses did not soften in public, and the common room, for all its noise, was public. But she had heard the true thing under the speech, and she had weighed it, and the weight had come out on his side. 3, she said, an exit clause. Either of us can walk once for any reason with 30 days' notice and no reprisal. We're allied because it's smarter than not being, not because we're chained. The day staying together is dumber than splitting. We split clean. That's the best term yet. Harry meant it, agreed. Then we have an arrangement. She did not offer her hand the way Malfoy had on the train, performed, expecting awe. She offered it flat across the table, businesslike, a contract between equals, and Harry took it, and her grip was cool and dry and exactly as firm as his. Welcome to Slytherin, Potter, she said. You're going to make the next 7 years very tiring. That's the idea. And there it was at the very end, under everything cold they had said to each other. the smallest thread of something warm, the recognition between two people who had each spent a life being the most careful mind in every room and had tonight finally met another one. Neither of them named it. Naming it would have cheapened it, and they were both too good at this to cheapen anything. But it was there when they let go of each other's hands, and it would still be there in 7 years, and it was, though neither of them could have said so on the first night, the single most dangerous thing either of the two great wizards above them had failed to account for. Across the room, Draco Malfoy finally noticed that the boy who lived had spent the entire evening at a window table with the Greengrass girl, ignoring the fire and the ring and everything that was supposed to matter, and Harry watched the noticing happen on his face, the flicker of someone realizing a game had started that he had not been told the rules of in a room he had thought he owned. "He's going to be a problem," Daphne murmured, following Harry's gaze. "He's going to be the first problem," Harry agreed. "Which makes him useful. Everyone watches how you handle the first one. Handle it well and you don't have to handle the next 3. You've planned that too." "I plan everything. It's the only thing I'm actually good at." Harry picked up the book she'd put down and turned it so he could read the spine, a treatise on magical contract law which told him more about Daphne Greengrass than an hour of conversation had. "The trick," he said, "is to make sure no one finds out how much of it is planning. Let them think it's instinct. People forgive instinct. They never forgive a child who's smarter than they are on purpose." A shadow fell across the table before she could answer. It was the man in black from the staff table, who had come down to the dungeons the way heads of house did on the first night, to count his new snakes and frighten them appropriately. Up close he was younger than the staff table had made him look, and far more tired, and his black eyes moved over Harry with the unhappy attention of a man examining a wound he has been told he must dress. "Mr. Potter." The voice was low and precise and carried a contempt so well-aged it had gone almost gentle. "How interesting. The whole castle expected Scarlet. The whole castle is rarely so entertained." His eyes flicked to Daphne and dismissed her, then came back to Harry and did not dismiss him at all. "I knew your father. He, too, believed the rules of this school were written for lesser men. He was wrong, and the wrongness of it followed him a very long way. I would hate to watch the lesson repeat." It was a probe dressed as a threat. The man wanted to see what Harry would do, flinch or flare or fawn. Harry did none of them. He looked up at Professor Severus Snape, head of Slytherin House, the third force in the dungeon that everyone in the firing forgot was a force at all, and he gave the man the one thing the man clearly was not braced for, which was a perfectly level, perfectly courteous, perfectly unafraid attention. "I never met my father, sir," Harry said. "I can't repeat a man I don't know. I'd rather be judged on what I do here than on a story about someone who died before I could remember his face." He held the black eyes. "If I break a rule, I expect you to take the points. I'd think less of the house if you didn't." Snape's expression did not change, but something behind it recalculated. Harry watched it happen, the same as it had happened behind Dumbledore's glasses at the staff table, the involuntary arithmetic of a clever person meeting data that did not fit the model. The man had come to the table expecting James Potter's son, arrogant, careless, easy to despise and therefore easy to manage. He had found instead a boy who'd asked to be held to the rules, who'd refused the bait of his own father, who looked at a feared man and was not afraid. "We shall see what you do here, Mr. Potter," Snape said at last, and the gentleness had gone out of the contempt and left only the wariness, which was worse for Harry's enemies and better for Harry. "We shall see indeed." He swept off into the green light, robe snapping, and Harry watched him go and understood that he had not made a friend. That man would never be anyone's friend, but he had stopped being a thing to be despised and become a thing to be watched. And watched things are safer than despised ones, because a man who is watching you is at least taking you seriously. "That," said Daphne, "was a man who decided to hate you this morning and is annoyed that you've made it complicated." "He loved my mother," Harry said. It was a guess, but he was fairly sure of it. "And he hated my father, and I have her eyes in his face, so I'm a wound he has to look at for 7 years. There's no winning him, there's only being too useful to throw away." He turned the contract law book over in his hands. "We can work with that." "We," she said, trying the word. "We," he confirmed. The fire burned down. The firing thinned as the older students drifted to bed, and Draco Malfoy was the last of them to go, and he paused at the foot of the dormitory stairs to throw one long look back at the window table where the boy who lived sat with the Ice Queen's daughter over a book about contracts. Two cold children in the green light, talking too quietly to hear. Harry let him look. Letting Draco see them together cost nothing tonight and bought a great deal. It told Malfoy that the game had a second player, and it made him afraid, and fear made brittle people do stupid things early, where the stupidity was cheap to exploit and easy to survive. "He'll write to his father tonight," Daphne said, watching Draco climb the stairs. "Lucius will hear about this by Wednesday." The boy who lived sordid to Slytherin and ignoring the Malfoy heir for a neutral house, that's not a thing Lucius will be able to leave alone. "Good," Harry said. "I want them moving. A man who's moving makes mistakes. A man who's patient and watching is much harder to read, which is the headmaster's whole problem, by the way. Dumbledore won't move for a long time." He'll watch and wait and be kind to me until kindness stops working, and only then will he reach for something else, and I won't see what until it's already in my hand. He set the book down. The Malfoys are the easy enemy, Dumbledore's the hard one. We make our first moves where it's easy. We don't go anywhere near the hard one until we've practiced on the easy one and we know what our own machine can actually do. Our machine. Daphne's mouth did the dry not quite smile again. We don't have a machine, we have an arrangement and a window table. We'll have a machine by Christmas. Harry stood, and the green light slid off him, and for one moment, 11 years old and underground beneath a lake in a castle full of people who wanted to use him, he looked exactly like what the Sorting Hat had seen and the whole school had missed. There are 40 children in this house. Most of them think they have to choose between a Dark Lord's leftover servants and an old man's army, and they're frightened because both choices end with them dead in a war they didn't start. We're going to offer them a third thing, a house that belongs to itself, bend to no king. He looked down at her. Your family's been saying it for 200 years to keep one bloodline alive. I want to say it to the whole dungeon and keep all of them alive. And then I want this house to be worth so much, an answer to so few, that when the war finally comes back, both kings have to come to us. Daphne Greengrass looked up at him for a long moment in the green underwater light, and whatever she had expected when she'd told him he was in her light, it had not been this, an 11-year-old proposing to take a kingdom and protect it at the same time, cold and warm in the same breath, dangerous in a way she had not known a boy could be. You're either going to change everything, she said slowly, or get us both killed. Probably both, Harry said. In that order if we're careful. Good night, Greengrass, we start tomorrow. He left her at the window table with the book and the green light and the first true ally either of them had ever had, and he climbed the stairs to a dormitory full of boys who would spend the next 7 years discovering, one by one, that the quiet one in the corner bed had walked into Slytherin already knowing exactly what he intended to become. Harry slept badly and woke early, which suited him. He wanted the hall before it was full. It was not empty when he came up from the dungeons, but it was sparse, a scatter of early risers, the long tables mostly bare, the enchanted ceiling pale with a morning that had not committed to being fine. Daphne was already there, of course. She had taken a seat at the Slytherin table with a clear sightline to both the doors and the staff dais, and she had left exactly enough room beside her to say something without saying it. Harry sat in the room she had left. You're early, she said, buttering toast as though it were a thing she had thought hard about. So are you. We're going to be early for 7 years. People who are already seated watch the people who arrive. People who arrive are watched. Always be seated first. He poured tea he did not especially want, because a boy with something in front of him looks settled, and a settled boy looks like he belongs to the room. We need to talk about the order of operations before the house wakes up and starts performing at us. Order of operations. She slid the marmalade an inch toward him, a public courtesy older students would note and read as alliance without being able to say why. She had understood the game of the empty seat without being told. He revised her upward again the third time in 12 hours and stopped revising, because at a certain point you simply concede that someone is as sharp as you are and start planning around it instead of being surprised by it. Go on then. What's first? People, not plans. We've got the doctrine, bend to no king. A doctrine recruits no one on its own. What recruits people is watching someone they respect choose it and not die. He kept his voice under the morning clatter. So first we pick 3, not the loud ones. The loud ones are already spoken for. Parkinson runs Malfoy's gossip. The big 2 are furniture. The Carrows are their fathers in miniature, and there's nothing in them worth the risk. We want the ones standing at the edges doing arithmetic. Ones who haven't chosen yet because they're smart enough to be afraid of the choice. 3 names, Daphne said. You've already got them. I've got 2. You'll have the third because you know the house and I've been here a night. Harry turned the teacup a quarter turn, the busy work of a boy with nothing on his mind. Theodore not. He sat at the far end last night with a book he was actually reading, and every time someone said the word father near the firing, his jaw did something he didn't want it to do. His is in Azkaban or near it, Death Eater, old guard. A boy who hates his father and can't say so is a boy looking for a third door. We're the third door. Her eyes had gone to the far end of the table, where a thin dark boy sat alone over porridge and a book, and come back. That's fair. And the second, Blaise Zabini. The handsome one who looked bored last night because being bored is the most expensive thing he owns. 7 dead stepfathers and a mother who's rich and ruthless and teaching him to be both. He won't come for a doctrine. He'll come for advantage. Show him we can get him something he wants and can't get for himself, and he buys in, and once he's bought in, his pride won't let him have backed the wrong side. Mercenaries are loyal as long as you keep being the better deal. We keep being the better deal. And mine, and yours, you know who I'm missing. Daphne was quiet a moment, marmalade forgotten. Tracy Davis, she said, half-blood which the firing holds against her, which means she's never going to be theirs, and they've made very sure of it. She's the warmest person in this house and the most underestimated, and she knows what every first and second year is afraid of before they know it themselves, because people tell her things. She's also, and here something almost human crossed Daphne's face and was put away, my friend, which means she comes in on my word, not as a recruit. Term 4 if we're counting. People I vouch for are mine to keep safe. You don't spend them. Agreed, that's a good term. Add it. Harry meant it and let her see he meant it, because the whole arrangement lived or died on her believing that equal was not a word he'd used to get her hand across the table. Not in Zabini I court, Davis you bring. By Friday we want a table, this seat, every morning, the four of us and you and me, where the house can see it forming and can't tell whether it's friendship or something with teeth. Let them wonder. Wondering is recruiting too. The doors opened on a knot of older students, and behind them the staff began to filter onto the dais, and Harry let his attention go up to it without seeming to. Dumbledore had not come yet. Snape had, and was watching the Slytherin table with the unhappy diligence of a man counting a flock he suspected of harboring a wolf. And at the end of the dais, fumbling with a teapot as though it might bite him, was a thin young man in a great absurd turban the color of a bruise, who flinched at the noise of the doors and smiled too much and could not seem to look at anyone for long. He looked at Harry for long. It was only a second, and it was easy to miss, and Harry would have missed it if he had not spent his whole life learning to feel the weight of a gaze before he turned to meet it. The turbaned man's eyes found Harry across the whole length of the hall, and there was nothing nervous in them at all for that 1 second. There was something old and patient and cold, something that knew exactly what it was looking at and was pleased to find it sorted into green, and then the second ended and the man fumbled the teapot and apologized to it and was a stammering nobody again. Harry's scar did not hurt. He had read that it sometimes did in the worst of the stories the world told about him. It did not hurt now, but the cold went down his spine all the same, the body's older knowledge arriving before the mind's, and he kept his face on his tea and did not let one muscle of it move. Who, he said very quietly, is the one in the turban? Daphne did not turn to look, which told him she was already as good at this as he'd hoped. Quirrell, defense. He's a joke, went off to find vampires or something and came back stammering and afraid of his own subject. Why, he just looked at me, Harry said, and for 1 second he wasn't afraid of anything. Now her eyes came to his, sharp. You're sure? I'm sure. He set the cup down level, unhurried, a boy finishing his breakfast. Don't look at him, don't change anything. We keep this and we say nothing, and we don't let anyone, not Malfoy, not Snape, not the headmaster, know that we've noticed there's something wrong with the man teaching defense. Whatever that is, it's worth more to us as a thing we know and no one knows we know than as a thing we say out loud and spend for nothing. You think it's him. Daphne's voice had gone very low and very flat, the other king. I think, Harry said, that on my first morning in this castle the most frightened man on the staff looked at the boy who lived like a wolf looking at a door it's already through. I don't know what that means yet. I know it's the most valuable thing I've learned since the sorting, and I know we hold it. He stood, gathering his bag, an ordinary boy late for nothing. Come on, Charms, let's go be unremarkable in front of everyone for a few hours. We've already been remarkable enough for one day. She rose with him, and they left the hall together, the boy who lived in the Ice Queen's daughter, walking out under the eyes of a school that did not yet have a name for what it was watching. And behind them, at the end of the staff table, a man in a bruise-colored turban watched them go, and did not smile, and reached up once to touch the cloth at the back of his head, as though something there had spoken. Above them, in a tower bright with the wrong kind of light, an old man sat awake a long time over a chessboard he played alone, moving white and black by turns, and could not quite explain to himself why one piece he had counted on for 11 years had stopped behaving like a piece and started, very quietly, to behave like a hand. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, Building the Block. The ledger was an ordinary 4th year's exercise book, black-bound, the kind sold by the gross in any Hogsmeade stationer, and Harry had chosen it precisely because it was the most boring object in the dungeon. No one searched a boring thing. He laid it on the window table on the third night between himself and Daphne and opened it to the first page, which was blank. This is the house, he said. Daphne looked at the empty page, then at him. It's a no. It's going to be the house. He uncapped a pen, Muggle, also boring, also unsearched, and began to write down the line at the top of the page. 41 Slytherins. Every one of them owes someone something or is owed by someone, and not one of them has ever written it down, because writing it down is vulgar and admitting it is weak. So they carry it all in their heads badly, and they forget who helped whom in second year, and they remember insults longer than favors, which is exactly backwards. He turned the page toward her. We're going to remember everything, who helped whom, who's afraid of whom, who's owed and who's owing. We're going to be the only 2 people in this dungeon who actually know what the house owes itself. A ledger of favors. Daphne said it slowly, turning it over for the flaw, and Harry watched her not find one. If anyone reads it, they'll see a notebook full of initials and numbers that mean nothing without the key, and the key is in here. He touched his temple once. The book is the backup, not the secret. The secret stays where no one can summon it. He slid the pen across to her. Your handwriting's better than mine, and you know the families. Start with the upper years. I want to know who Marcus Flint owes and who owes Marcus Flint before I ever have to speak to him. She took the pen. She did not take it the way someone takes an assignment. She took it the way someone takes a stake in a thing, and for the next hour the two of them built the first map of the dungeon in a stationer's exercise book. And when the firing laughed across the room, neither of them looked up, because the firing was on the page now, reduced to initials and arrows, and a thing you have written down has stopped being able to frighten you. By the time the green windows had gone fully black, the page had become a country. Harry looked at it and understood the shape of what they were about to do, and so did Daphne, and neither of them said anything, because saying it would have made it smaller. Not first, Harry said at last. Tomorrow, he's the cheapest to win and the most expensive to lose, which makes him the place you start. Cheapest how? He already wants what we're selling. We don't have to build the door, we just have to be standing in it when he turns around. Harry closed the ledger on the country they had drawn. Zabini's the hard one, not we offer a home. Zabini, we have to outbid a mother who's been teaching him the price of everything since he could walk, save him for when we've got something to spend. He did not approach Theodore, not, that was the whole of the method. You did not approach the wary, you arranged the room so that the wary approached you. The library on the fourth afternoon was nearly empty, the long tables gold with the slant of autumn coming through high windows, and Harry took the seat across from the only other Slytherin first year who came to the library to actually read. He did not greet him. He set down a book, Curses and Countercurses, a perfectly ordinary first-year curiosity, and read it, and let Theodore not decide for himself whether the silence between them was an accident. Not was a thin boy with ink on his fingers and the watchfulness of a child who has learned that rooms can change temperature without warning. He read 3 pages without turning one. Then he said, very low, without looking up, "You sat at the wrong table on the first night. I sat at the only interesting one. You ignored Malfoy." Not turned a page he had not read, the same trick Daphne had used, and Harry understood that the wary all developed the same habits, the small economies of children who could not afford to be seen wanting anything. People who ignore Malfoy tend to find out why other people don't. People who ignore Malfoy and survive it tend to be worth knowing. Harry kept his eyes on his book. Your father's in Azkaban. The temperature of the table changed. Not went very still, the stillness of a boy who has been struck before and has learned not to flinch first, because flinching tells the striker where you feel it. That's not a question, Not said. No, it's the thing nobody in this castle will say to your face, so I'm saying it because I'd rather you knew where I stand than wonder. Harry turned a page of his own. Half this house thinks your father's a hero who got caught. The other half thinks he's a coward who got caught. Nobody ever asked you what you think, because they've all already decided you're a smaller copy of him and they're waiting to see when you'll grow into it. Not strutted the thing Harry had seen at the feast, the silent war of a boy keeping his face. And you've decided I'm not. I've decided I don't care what your father is. I care what you are, and what you are is the only person in our year who reads in here instead of performing out there, which means you've worked out the same thing I have. Now Harry looked up and held the boy's eyes and did not soften them. There's a war coming back. When it comes, every child of every Death Eater in this school is going to be handed his father's side like a coat that's already been bought for him, and most of them will put it on because it's cold and the coat is there. You don't want the coat, you've never wanted the coat, but you've never had anywhere else to stand, so you've been standing very still and hoping nobody hands it to you. The library held its breath around them, gold and dusty and silent. There's somewhere else to stand, Harry said. I'm building it. It's a house inside the house, neutral, the way Greengrass is neutral, except with enough of us that neutral stops being a thing you survive alone and starts being a thing that protects you. We don't serve the Dark Lord's leftovers, and we don't serve Dumbledore. We serve each other, and we make ourselves worth too much for either side to break. He let that sit. You'd never have to wear the coat, and the day your father gets out of Azkaban and reaches for you, you'd have 40 people standing between him and you instead of nobody. Theodore not looked at him for a long time. When he spoke, his voice had gone rough at the edges, one beat of something he had clearly not let himself feel in front of anyone in years, and then it was put away and the careful boy was back. What do you want from me? Everything you already do for free. Harry returned to his book because he had learned that you ask for the hard thing while looking away, so the other person can say yes without being watched saying it. You watch, you read, you remember which professor is in a temper and which prefect is skimming the rota and which second year is being leaned on for his pocket money. You know the temperature of every room you walk into. I want that, not as a spy, as a partner. You bring me the house's weather, and in exchange you get the one thing your father's name has never been able to buy you, which is a place where being his son is the least interesting thing about you. For a moment Nott did not answer. Then he closed Curses and Countercurses and squared it against the edge of the table and said, Greengrass is really in this. Equal, they're saying, not behind you. Beside me, ask her yourself. She'll tell you the terms. She wrote half of them. Then I'm in. Nott said it flatly, a boy who had learned not to dress up the things he meant. On one condition, my father's friends have sons in this house, Caro, Avery's nephew. When the war comes, they'll know I didn't put on the coat and they'll call it betrayal, and betrayal is the one thing that family forgives slower than Azkaban. He met Harry's eyes. When that happens, you protect me like you said, not we'll see, like you said, 40 people between them and me. Written down tonight, Harry said, page 2, yours. He closed his own book. Welcome to the house inside the house, not, you're the first one who chose it. People are going to remember that you were first. It was the right thing to have said, and Harry had known it would be before he said it, because the wary will give you their whole loyalty for the single thing the loud have never bothered to offer them, which is the dignity of having mattered first. That night the ledger gained a second page, and at the top of it, in Daphne's good hand, were the initials TN, and beside them a single word that was not a favor or a debt but a promise, and Harry looked at it a long moment before he let her close the book. "One," Daphne said. "One," he agreed. "Zabini next, and Zabini's going to cost us something real." Blaise Zabini was being extorted, and he was bored about it, which was the most expensive thing he owned. It took not 2 days to bring them the shape of it, the house's weather delivered exactly as promised. A third year named Cassius Warrington, large and dull and ambitious in the way of boys who have realized they will never be clever, had worked out that Blaise Zabini received a great deal of money from home and feared a great deal of talk about where the money came from. Zabini's mother was beautiful and rich and had buried 7 husbands, and the wizarding world had a word for a woman like that which it never quite said aloud, and Warrington had discovered that Blaise would pay, quietly, to keep the word from being said in the common room. It was not a large sum. It was the principle Warrington enjoyed, the principle of a stupid boy having found a lever under a clever one. "He'll never come to us for help," Daphne said. They were walking the lake path in the cold, where the wind ate words before they carried. His pride won't let him admit he's being bled by Cassius Warrington of all people. He'd rather pay forever. "I'm not going to offer him help. Help is humiliating. You owe the helper." Harry watched the gray water. "I'm going to make the problem disappear without his asking, in a way that lets him keep thinking he could have handled it himself, and then I'm going to never mention it. That's not help. That's a demonstration. You don't recruit a mercenary by being kind to him. You recruit him by being the most competent thing in the room and letting him do the math." And how does Cassius Warrington stop being a problem? Cassius Warrington owes Marcus Flint 11 galleons from a card game in September. Harry said it the way you lay down a card you have been holding since the deal. It's on page 1. Flint's the Quidditch captain, and Warrington wants to make the team next year more than he wants anything in the world. And Marcus Flint, page 1 again, owes the Slytherin team a seeker, because the one they've got is leaving and the reserve is hopeless, and the captain who wins the cup gets remembered and the one who loses it gets forgotten. He turned to her. "I don't have to threaten Warrington. I have to make Flint understand that Warrington is the kind of boy who creates problems in a house that's about to need to be very quiet and very united, and that a captain who wants a clean run at the cup should put his debtor on a short leash. Flint does the rest, because it costs Flint nothing and buys Flint a favor from the most interesting first year in living memory." Daphne was quiet a few steps. The wind took the lake into small gray ridges. "You'd be spending a favor with Flint we don't have yet. I'd be opening an account with Flint, which is better. A favor owed is a transaction, an account is a relationship." Harry almost smiled and did not, "And Flint's worth far more than Zabini. Zabini's a clever first year. Flint's an upper year with a vote in things first years don't get to see. We're not spending Flint to buy Zabini. We're using Zabini as the excuse to start banking with Flint." He found Marcus Flint the next evening, not in the common room where everything was performance, but in the corridor outside the changing rooms where the captain liked to brood over a clipboard after a training the team had flubbed. Flint was big and slab-faced and not nearly as stupid as he let the school believe, which Harry had guessed from the fact that he had been captain 2 years running of a house that ate weak captains alive. Potter. Flint looked at him without warmth and without dismissal, which was already further than most upper years got. The famous one, "You want something, or you'd have sent a note." "I want to do you a favor," Harry said, "and I want you to remember that I did." Flint snorted. "First years don't do me favors. Cassius Warrington's been shaking down Blaise Zabini for pocket money, quietly. The kind of quiet that gets loud at exactly the wrong time, say, the week before a match, when the last thing a captain wants is his house tearing itself up over who blackmailed whom in front of the whole common room." Harry kept his tone level, a boy reporting weather. "Warrington owes you 11 galleons and wants a place on your team next year more than he wants to breathe. A word from you and he stops. No fuss, no scene, no captain dragged into a first-year squabble in front of Snape. The house stays quiet and you stay out of it, except that I'll know you did it and I pay what I owe." Flint studied him for a long moment, the slow recalculation of a heavy man discovering the small thing in front of him is not small. "And what's a first year's favor worth to me? Right now, nothing. That's the point." Harry let the honesty land, because honesty was the rarest currency in the dungeon and therefore the most valuable. "I'm not selling you tonight's favor. I'm telling you that I'm the kind of person who keeps a ledger and pays it and remembers, and that in a year or 2, or in whatever's coming after we all leave this school, you'd rather be owed by me than not. That's the whole offer. Deal with Warrington because it's free and it helps you, and let me start owing you. The rest takes care of itself." Marcus Flint laughed once, a surprised bark, and it was not unkind. "Greengrass put you up to this. Greengrass and I put each other up to everything." "That's also worth your knowing." Harry stepped back. Warrington by the weekend, and Flint, when you make the team list next year, the seeker problem you've got, I might know someone, we'll talk. He left the captain frowning over his clipboard at a first year who had walked off having given an order without once making it sound like one, and by the weekend Cassius Warrington had stopped shaking down Blaise Zabini and had no idea why, and the money simply stayed in Zabini's pocket where it had always belonged. Zabini noticed. Of course he noticed. Noticing what things cost was the family trade. And because he was clever, he did not thank anyone and did not ask, and spent 4 days watching the dungeon to work out which power had reached into his private misery and quietly closed it. And at the end of the 4 days he came, as Harry had known he would, to the window table and sat down across from the boy who lived without being invited, exactly as Harry had once done to Daphne. "You didn't do it to be thanked," Zabini said, "or you'd have made sure I knew." "I did it so you'd come and sit down," Harry said. "You're sitting down." Zabini's mouth curved, appreciating the move the way a duelist appreciates the touch that beats him. He was a beautiful, indolent, unsentimental boy, and he had been raised by a woman who had taught him that affection was a liability and competence was the only thing worth respecting, and Harry had just shown him competence and asked for nothing, which was a language Blaise Zabini had been waiting his whole life to be spoken to in. "My mother," Zabini said, "says you never take the first deal because the first deal is always the one that benefits the other person." "What's the first deal?" "There's no deal. That's what makes this one different from every conversation you've ever had about money." Harry leaned back. "I'm not going to extract anything from you. I solved Warrington because it was easy and because it told you something true, which is that I am better at this than the people currently bleeding you. I'm building something. It's neutral, we don't serve the dark and we don't serve Dumbledore, and it's going to be the most useful place to stand in this castle within a year. You can join it or not. If you join, you get the thing your money has never been able to buy you, which is a circle that's clever enough to be worth your boredom. If you don't, nothing happens, and Warrington still doesn't bother you because I don't do favors I take back. That's the whole pitch." Zabini looked at him and then at Daphne, who had said nothing, who had simply turned a page of her book and let the two of them fence, and something in the looking told Harry that Zabini had clocked the most important thing in the room, that the girl was not the lieutenant, that she had not deferred once, that whatever this was, it was being run by 2 minds and not one. "You're really equal," Zabini said to Daphne, the same disbelief Not had shown. "Not decorative." "He'd be dead within a month without me," Daphne said, not looking up, "and he knows it, which is the only reason I haven't gotten bored and left." "Does that answer the question?" Zabini laughed, the first real thing he had done in Harry's presence, and the laugh was the moment he bought in, though he would have denied it, though he would phrase his agreement as a favor to himself, as his mother had taught him to phrase everything. "I'm not loyal," he warned them. "I want you to know that going in. I stay as long as you're the best deal in the room. The day you're not, I walk." "That's the only kind of loyalty worth having," Harry said, "because it's the only kind you can verify. A man who'll never leave you has stopped telling you the truth about how you're doing. You leaving the day we get stupid is the most honest alarm bell I could ask for. Stay until we bore you. We don't intend to bore you." "Page 3, Daphne murmured and wrote BZ, and beside it, where Not's word had been a promise, she wrote a different word, a colder and more accurate one, and Zabini leaned over to read it and laughed again when he saw that it said exactly what their arrangement was and pretended nothing. "2, said Harry. "2, said Daphne. "And Tracy makes 3, but Tracy's mine, and I'm bringing her tomorrow, and you're going to be kind to her, Potter, because she's the one who's going to make all your cold arithmetic actually move through this house, and she won't do it if she thinks you see her as a tool." "I don't see anyone as a tool," Harry said, and Daphne looked at him for a moment, weighing it, because it was the most important thing he had said since the first night, and they both knew it. "That's the whole point of the thing we're building. Tools both kings have. We're offering people the experience of not being one. If I start treating our own people as tools, we're just a smaller version of what we're fighting, and you should hold me to that." Term 2, transparency of aims. This is the aim. Whatever Daphne had been weighing came out on his side again, the way it had on the first night, and she closed the ledger on 3 pages in a country, and the window table had stopped being 2 people and become the smallest possible beginning of a parliament. Tracy Davis was nothing like the rest of them, and that was the point. Where Nott was watchful and Zabini was cold and Daphne was glass over iron, Tracy was warm, openly, expensively warm in a house that treated warmth as a tell. She arrived at the window table the next evening, towed by Daphne, took one look at Harry and said, "So you're the one who's going to get Daphne killed," with such cheerful frankness that 2 older students turned to stare. "I'm going to try very hard not to," Harry said. Tracy dropped into the seat beside Daphne, which told Harry everything about where her loyalty sat and that it was not for sale. "Daph says you're building something where people like me don't have to spend 7 years being reminded we're half-bloods who got into Slytherin by accident. Is that true, or is that the recruiting version?" "It's true, and here's how you'll know it's true." Harry leaned forward. "I'm not going to ask you to pretend the house doesn't despise your blood. That would be a lie and you'd catch it. What I'm going to do is make your blood the least important fact about you by making you indispensable. The people who sneer at half-bloods stop sneering the day they need a half-blood's help and can't get it. You're going to be the person this whole block runs on, the one who knows what every frightened first year is afraid of, who hears it first when a family wavers, who can walk up to a Hufflepuff or a Ravenclaw without the whole school deciding it means war. The purebloods can't do that. Their blood's a cage as much as a crown. Yours is. That's not a weakness I'm tolerating. It's the most useful thing in the room, and I'd be a fool to waste it. Tracy looked at him for a long moment, and the warmth did not go away, but something sharpened underneath it, and Harry understood that Daphne had been exactly right, that this girl was nobody's tool, and would burn the whole thing down before she'd be used, and would give it everything she had the moment she believed she was wanted rather than spent. Okay, Tracy said simply. I believe you, mostly because Daph believes you, and Daph has never believed anyone in her life. She helped herself to Daphne's chocolate without asking. What do you need first? The little ones, Harry said. First and second years, the ones nobody's recruited because nobody bothers to recruit children who can't vote. Malfoy ignores them. The dark families ignore them. They're frightened and they're nobodies, and a frightened nobody who's offered a place will defend that place harder than anyone because it's the first place they've ever had. He met her eyes. Find me the ones who are scared. Bring them in slowly, gently, the way you do it, and I never could. By Christmas, I want the bottom half of this house to feel safer in our corner than anywhere else in the castle, and I want them to associate that safety with the word we're going to teach them. Bend to no king. You're going to take over Slytherin, Tracy said slowly, from the bottom, while Malfoy's busy guarding the top. Malfoy's guarding a throne, I'm building a floor. Harry sat back. Thrones tip, floors hold up everything that stands on them. By the time he notices the floor's mine, he'll be standing on it. Tracy Davis grinned, the first wholly delighted thing anyone had done at that table, and reached across and shook his hand without being asked, and that was 3, and the nucleus was real, and the ledger had 4 pages, and the dungeon had a second center now whether it knew it yet or not. It did not stay unnoticed for a week. Draco Malfoy was brittle, but brittle was not the same as blind, and by the second week of term he had counted the chairs at the window table and not liked the sum. So he did what brittle boys do when they feel a thing slipping. He reached for the most public possible way to take it back, and he chose the worst possible ground, and Harry let him, because the whole value of a first enemy is the lesson everyone else takes from watching you handle him. It happened in the common room on a Thursday with the fire high and most of the house present, which was exactly the audience Draco wanted, and exactly the audience Harry wanted for opposite reasons. Potter. Draco's voice cut across the room, pitched to Carrie, the voice of a boy who had rehearsed. I hear you've been collecting strays, the Knot boy, the Davis mudblood. A small, ugly stir went through the room at the word, and Tracy's face did not change because Daphne's hand had found her wrist under the table half a second before the word landed. Is that the famous Potter judgment, Azkaban's leavings and dirty blood? The firing smirked on cue. Pansy Parkinson laughed her half-second early laugh. And the rest of the house, the edges, the gray ones, the bottom half Tracy had already begun to gather, went very quiet and watched to see what the new power would do, because this was the test, and everyone in the room knew it was the test, including Harry, who had been waiting for it. He did not stand. Standing was Draco's move, the move of someone who needs his body to make his point because his words can't. Harry stayed in his chair and let the silence run 3 full seconds, which is a very long time in a room that is waiting, and then he spoke, and he spoke quietly, so that the whole room had to lean in to hear the most dangerous thing in it. Theodore Knott reads 3 languages and has forgotten more about old magic than this entire fire will learn before our OWLS, Harry said. Tracy Davis knows the name of every frightened first year in this house and what they cried about their first night away from home, which not one of you bothered to learn because you were too busy admiring each other. I didn't collect strays, Draco. I collected the 2 most useful people in our year while you were collecting applause. He let it breathe. But that's not really what you're asking, is it? What you're asking is why I sat with Greengrass instead of you on the first night in front of everyone. The room had gone absolutely still. Draco's face had begun to do the badly hidden thing it had done on the train. I'll tell you since you've asked in front of the house. Harry's voice never rose. I sat with Greengrass because she read the room and you performed for it, because she offered me terms and you offered me a hand and a speech your father wrote, because in 7 years when this all matters, I'd rather have 1 person beside me who'll tell me I'm wrong than 40 behind me who tell me I'm wonderful. He looked at Draco and there was nothing cruel in it, which was what made it land. You're not my enemy because of your blood or your father or your name. Your blood's as good as mine. Your name's better. You're my rival because you think this house is a throne you inherited, and I think it's 40 people who deserve better than to be somebody's inheritance. That's a real disagreement. It's worth having. But don't dress it up as me insulting your purity, because everyone in this room can see that I'm the one who just defended 2 people's worth, and you're the one who called a girl a slur to score a point. Ask the room which of us sounded like a leader. And the room, this was the move, this was the whole move. The room did not answer, but its silence answered, because the edges and the gray ones and the frightened bottom half had just watched the boy who lived defend a half-blood's dignity with arithmetic instead of anger. and had watched Draco Malfoy reach for a slur and miss, and 100 small loyalties moved an inch in the dark, which was all Harry had wanted. Then he did the thing that mattered most, the thing the cold ones never remembered to do. He gave Draco a way out. "You're better than that word, Draco," Harry said, and now there was something almost generous in it, the generosity of a man who has already won and can afford to be kind. "Your family's old and your mind's quick, and you could be the most useful person in this house if you ever decided you wanted to lead it instead of own it. The offer the rest of them got is open to you too. Beside, not behind, I don't have a behind, think about it." He turned back to his book, dismissing the confrontation by refusing to keep having it. But don't call Tracy that again, not because I'll make you regret it, because it makes you smaller than you are and you're the only rival in this house worth my time. I'd hate to lose you to it. It was a masterstroke, and Daphne knew it, and Zabini knew it, and even Not, watching from the edge, knew it. Harry had refused to humiliate Draco, had instead handed him a version of himself that was better than the one he was performing, and had done it in front of the whole house, so that if Draco lashed out now, he would be lashing out at generosity, and if he went quiet, he would be conceding, and there was no third door. Draco went quiet, his face closed. He climbed the stairs to the dormitories with Crabbe and Goyle trailing, and the Firing's laughter had gone thin and uncertain behind him, and the common room exhaled, and the floor Harry was building gained a great many invisible planks that night. "That," Zabini murmured, "was the most expensive mercy I've ever watched anyone spend." "It wasn't mercy," Harry said. "Mercy's free." "That cost me Draco's hatred for the rest of school, because there's nothing a proud boy resents like being forgiven in public. But it bought me the room, and the room's worth more than Draco, and Draco was never going to be ours anyway." He closed his book. "The trick with a rival you can't win is to make him radioactive, to make every cruel thing he does cost him more than it costs you. He'll keep being cruel, it's all he's got. And every time the house will remember that I offered him better and he chose worse. We don't have to beat Draco. We just have to keep being the better offer in public until being his enemy looks like the sensible thing and being his friend looks like a mistake." Daphne wrote nothing in the ledger about it because some moves did not go in the ledger, but she looked at Harry across the table for a long moment with something that was not quite warmth and not quite fear and said, "Snape was watching from the stairs, the whole time." "I know," Harry said. "I wanted him to." Severus Snape tested Harry the next morning in potions in front of the Gryffindors because a head of house who suspects he has a wolf in his flock will find a way to make the wolf show its teeth where he can see them. "Mr. Potter," Snape's voice slid through the dungeon classroom like cold water. "Since you have apparently appointed yourself a leader of men, let us see whether you can lead yourself through a third-year question. What is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane?" It was a trap with two jaws. Answer wrong and look like a fraud in front of the house he was building. Answer right and look like a show-off, a boy too clever by half, the exact thing the dungeon mistrusted. Snape had built it carefully, and Harry admired the construction even as he stepped between its teeth. "They're the same plant, sir," Harry said, "also called aconite. I'd only add that the question's a good one for a reason that isn't in the book. A thing that goes by three names is a thing people argue about without realizing they agree, which is the most dangerous kind of argument. I imagine that's why you ask it." The classroom was silent. Snape's black eyes had narrowed, and Harry watched the man weigh the answer and find that it had slipped both jaws of the trap at once correct, but turned outward into something almost like a shared joke, deflecting the show-off charge by pretending the cleverness belonged to Snape's question rather than to Harry's answer. It was deference and competence in a single sentence, and it gave Snape nothing to punish and nothing to despise. 10 points to Slytherin," Snape said at last, each word reluctant as a tooth pulled, "for knowing the answer, and a detention's worth of warning, Mr. Potter, for the habit of telling your teachers why they ask their questions. You are not as subtle as you believe." "No, sir," Harry agreed pleasantly, "but I'm working on it." A muscle moved at the corner of Snape's mouth that on any other man would have been the ghost of a smile, and was on Snape the closest thing to respect the dungeon had seen him offer in a decade. He swept on to torment a Gryffindor, and the matter was closed, and Harry had passed a test he had not been allowed to know he was taking, and the house had watched their new center handle the most feared man in the castle without losing a single point or an ounce of dignity. "He likes you," Daphne said low as they ground their roots. "It's killing him, but he likes you. He doesn't like me. He's decided I'm not what he feared and not yet what he's afraid I'll become, and that makes me a thing he has to watch instead of a thing he can dismiss." Harry measured aconite into the scale with a steady hand. "That's better than liking. Liking fades. A clever man's wary attention is the most durable relationship you can build because he renews it himself every day for free." He glanced up at the man in black sweeping between the cauldrons. "Snape's the third force in this dungeon, and everyone forgets it. I don't intend to forget it. The day comes we need a head of house who will look the other way at the right moment. I want him to have spent 2 years discovering I'm useful and never once discovering I'm a threat. That's a long game. We start it now." By the end of the second week, the nucleus was real, and the dungeon had begun, without quite admitting it, to reorganize itself around a window table near the green windows, where 4 first-years and a tall, fair girl met every morning, and a notebook had 4 pages and a country, and the bottom half of the house had started to drift toward a corner where a half-blood girl was kind to frightened children, and an upper-year captain had begun to nod at a first-year in the corridors. And a brittle blonde boy had begun to understand that he was defending a throne in a house that was quietly being rebuilt beneath him into something with no throne in it at all. 3 of them, Daphne said that night, the ledger open between them, the country grown. Not Zabini, Tracy, Flint warming, the little one starting to come. It's a beginning. It's the whole beginning. Harry looked at the 4 pages. Everything else is addition. The hard part was proving the thing could exist, that a child could refuse both kings and not be crushed, and that people would rather stand with him than kneel to either. We've proved it 3 times in public. He closed the book. Now it spreads on its own the way fear spreads, except it's the opposite of fear. We've built the first safe place in this castle. Safe places grow. Daphne looked at the closed ledger and then at him and said the thing they had both been circling all week, the thing that was either a warning or a beginning and was, in fact, both. They're going to start counting us now, she said. Malfoy already is, Snape already is, and whatever's behind that turban already is since the feast. She held his eyes. We've spent 2 weeks being too small to bother with. That's over. The day you become worth counting is the day you become worth removing. I know, Harry said, and there was no fear in it, and no bravado either, only the flat certainty of a boy who had walked into this castle knowing exactly what he intended to become. That's the next chapter, and it's the one I've been waiting for. Being ignored is safe and useless. Being counted is dangerous and necessary. You can't take a kingdom from the shadows forever. Sooner or later you have to be seen to do it, and survive the seeing. He stood, and the green light slid off him, and the dungeon's second center went up to bed, having built, in 14 days, the floor that the throne above it did not yet know it was standing on. Above the lake, in his bright wrong tower, the old man added a line to a list he kept and told no one about, and the line said only, "The Potter boy is recruiting, not following, recruiting." And he sat a long time with that, and did not like the shape of it, and could not yet decide whether the thing to do was to reach for the boy sooner, or to wait and see what a child built when he thought no one was watching him build it. He decided to wait. It was the headmaster's gift and the headmaster's flaw, the patience that had outlasted one dark lord in wood. He was certain, outlast whatever an 11-year-old thought he was assembling in the dark under the lake. It was the first mistake Albus Dumbledore made about Harry Potter. It would not be the last. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. Grey Harry. The summons came on a Tuesday, written in a looping hand on cream paper, and it offered Harry a lemon drop before it offered him anything else, which told him everything about the man who had sent it. He wrote that the password to his office is sherbet lemon, Daphne said, reading over his shoulder. He's told you a secret you didn't ask for. That's the first move. It's a good first move. Harry folded the note. You give a person a small piece of trust they didn't earn, and most people feel obligated to give one back. He's not summoning me to a meeting. He's summoning me to a relationship, and he started it by being generous, so that anything I refuse him afterward feels ungrateful. He stood. He's very good at this. Better than Malfoy, better than anything I've seen. I want you to know that going in case I come back having agreed to something I didn't notice agreeing to. If I do, you tell me. Term 2. You're nervous. Daphne said it without judgment, a fact laid on the table. I'm respectful. They're not the same thing, but they look alike from outside, and it's useful to let powerful men confuse them. He pocketed the note. Dumbledore's the one who matters. The Malfoys want to use me, and they're clumsy about it. Dumbledore wants to love me into being useful, and he's not clumsy about anything. Wish me a boring afternoon. The headmaster's office sat at the top of a moving stair behind a stone gargoyle, and it was full, floor to impossible ceiling, of small silver instruments that spun and puffed and ticked, and Harry understood the room the moment he entered it. Every one of those instruments was a thing that did something Dumbledore could have explained and chose not to, so that visitors spent the meeting half distracted by wonder, off balance, reaching for understanding and finding only the old man's pale, amused eyes waiting for them to give up. A red gold bird watched him from a perch. A sword and a battered hat sat in a glass case. And behind a clawed desk, Albus Dumbledore rose with both hands extended, as though Harry were a long-awaited grandson and not a child he had left on a doorstep in November and not seen since. Harry, he said, warm as a hearth, how good of you to come. Sit, sit. Lemon drop. They are muggles sweet, of which I am unreasonably fond. No, thank you, sir. Harry sat in the offered chair, which was deep and soft and angled. He noticed slightly upward, so that one looked at the headmaster from a child's height. He sat forward instead, on the edge level. It's kind of you to make time. I imagine running a school leaves you very little. It leaves me a great deal less than people suppose, and a great deal more than I would like. The twinkle was fully lit now, the harmlessness laid on thick as butter. I confess I have wished to speak with you since the sorting. It was unexpected, not unwelcome, you understand. The hat sees what we cannot, but unexpected. He let it hang, an invitation to explain, to apologize, to seek reassurance. Your mother and father were Gryffindors, you know, as was I, as I had perhaps too easily assumed you might be. There it was, the first hook, baited with the dead. Harry looked at the old man and felt the pull of it, the genuine, expert pull, the offer of a lineage and a love in a place already warm and waiting, and he understood that this was the single most dangerous sentence anyone had spoken to him since he came to the castle, precisely because it was kind and precisely because part of him wanted it. "Did you know them well, sir?" Harry asked. "My parents." Something flickered across the old face. Harry had aimed the question to make it flicker, because a man who wants to use your parents on you should be made to feel the weight of them himself. "I knew them," Dumbledore said more quietly. "I cared for them a very great deal. Their deaths are among the heaviest of the sorrows I carry. Then you'll understand why I'm not a Gryffindor." Harry kept his voice gentle, because gentleness was the only register in which you could say a hard thing to a man this powerful and survive it. They were brave, and they trusted the brave side, and they trusted you, and they died at 21 in a house that someone they trusted had given away. I read everything I could find about the war before I came here, sir. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for the mistake, the thing they did that I could refuse to do. And the thing they did was choose a side and trust it completely, and the side could not keep them alive. He held the pale eyes which had stopped twinkling. "I'm not braver than my parents, I'm just less willing to die the same way, so I came to the house that survives. I hope that doesn't disappoint you." The office was silent but for the ticking of 100 small silver lies. Fawkes shifted on his perch. And Albus Dumbledore looked at the 11-year-old on the edge of the deep soft chair, and for the second time, the first had been at the feast, Harry watched the harmlessness slip, just at the corners, and saw underneath it the oldest and most dangerous mind in Britain recalculating a peace that had refused to stay a peace. "You are a remarkable young man," Dumbledore said at last, and he meant it, which made it worse. "Wiser than your years and warier. I find I cannot decide whether that wariness will be your salvation or your prison." He folded his long hands. "May I be honest with you, Harry, as I would not be with most boys your age. There is a darkness that did not die the night your parents did. It is patient and it is gathering, and when it returns, as it will, this country will need people of courage to stand against it. I had hoped you might be such a person. I had hoped to help you become one. I see now that you have your own ideas of how to stand, and I will not insult you by pretending I find them comfortable. But I will ask you one thing, and I will ask it plainly." The blue eyes had gone very steady. "When the choice comes, and it will come, between the light and the dark, you will not stand in the middle and call it wisdom. The middle is where the dark does its quietest work. Promise an old man that much." It was the real move, finally, stripped of the lemon drops and the dead parents, the demand that Harry pre-commit now at 11 to being the lights, and Harry admired it even as he refused it because it was beautifully made. "I can't promise that, sir," Harry said. "I'm sorry, not because I love the dark, I don't. I've seen what it did to my family, and I'd burn it down if burning it down would work. But because every man who's ever wanted to use a boy has told him that the middle is cowardice and his side is the light. The Malfoys say it. I expect the thing in the dark says it too. You're a better man than either of them, and I believe you mean it. But the words are the same words, and I promised myself before I ever got on the train that I'd never sign anything because the person offering it was kind." He stood because the meeting was over, and a child who knows when a meeting is over is a child no one can hold. "I won't help the dark. You have my word on the part I can actually keep. But I won't hand you my judgment either, sir. Not even yours, especially not yours. You're the only person in this castle good enough to make me want to." He left the headmaster sitting beneath his ticking instruments, and Fawkes sang a single low note as the door closed, and Albus Dumbledore did not reach for a lemon drop, and sat for a very long time with the discovery that he had met, in a child, the one thing his long life had taught him he could not govern, a mind that had decided in advance not to be moved by love. The second king came for Harry 3 days later in a corridor, and did not bother with sweets. It was the third-floor passage that smelled of old stone and unlit torches, and Harry was there because Knott's weather report had flagged it, students avoided it, professors patrolled it more than the lack of classrooms warranted, and a thing that is guarded more than it should be is a thing worth understanding. He had gone alone against Daphne's objection because some things you learn only in places you are not supposed to be, and he had found the corridor empty. It was not empty for long. H. Harry P. Potter. Professor Quirrell came out of the dark with his turban catching the torchlight the color of an old wound, and he was stammering and smiling too much and afraid of everything, and Harry watched the performance with the part of his mind that had been waiting since the feast and felt the cold come down his spine before the man had finished the name. "Out of B-bed, out of bounds, dear me. A Slytherin should know B better. You don't stammer when you look at me," Harry said quietly. "You did it at the feast and you're doing it now. The stammer's for everyone else, so let's not, Professor, it's just us, and I already know." For a moment the corridor was very still, and then the stammer stopped, the way a played note stops when the finger lifts, and what stood in front of Harry was not afraid of anything at all. The torches guttered, all of them at once, as if something had breathed. And under the smell of stone there rose another smell, faint and wrong, Swedish and cold, the smell of a thing that should not be in a body and was. "Clever," said Quirrell, and the voice was his own and not his own, two registers writing one breath. "Far clever than the others said. They told me you were a child. They were mistaken. You knew at the feast. You have said nothing for 2 weeks. You know what it means, boy, to hold a thing like that and not spend it." The pale eyes considered him with an attention that was very old and very patient and entirely without mercy. "It means you understand power. Most do not. Most of these cattle would have run screaming to the old fool the moment they suspected. You held it, you waited, you used it to learn." A pause that was almost approval. "You and I are not so different." "We're very different," Harry said, "but go on, you came to say something, say it." Dry sound came out of the man that might have been laughter from whatever rode behind his eyes. "You were promised to neither side, and you have refused both. I have watched. The old man wants you for his light, and you sent him away with nothing. The Malfoys want you for their gold, and you spat on the boy's hand. You build a thing of your own under the lake, a third power, neutral, yours." The voice dropped, and the wrongness in it leaned close, intimate as a secret. "I am the only one who has not yet asked you to kneel. So I will not ask, I will offer. You have read the war. You know who won it the first time, until an accident of his mother's love undid me for an hour. I do not forget such an hour, Harry Potter, and I do not waste a mind. Stand with me when I rise, not beneath me. You would only run from beneath, I see that, but with me, and I will give you what the old man never will. The truth of how things are, power without the lie that power is for someone else's good. And the name of the man who sold your mother and father to me, which I carry and which the old fool has never told you and never will." The corridor held its breath. The cold, sweet smell hung in it. And Harry understood that this was the most dangerous offer of his life, far more than Dumbledore's, because Dumbledore had offered him a cause, and this thing was offering him the truth, and the truth was the one bribe Harry had never learned to refuse. He refused it anyway. "You knew the man who sold them," Harry said, and his voice did not shake, "and you sent him, and you came to the house, and you pointed your wand at a baby in a cot. You don't get to offer me his name as a gift. You're the reason I'd need it." He took one step back, only one, and kept his eyes on the thing behind the turban. "Here's what I've worked out, and you should know I've worked it out because it's the only thing keeping this conversation civil. You're not strong yet. You're a passenger in a frightened man's skull, and you came to a school full of children because there's something in this castle you can't get any other way, and you tried Dumbledore's symbol first, and the symbol said no. That's why you're offering instead of taking. If you could take, you would have. He let that land in the dark. So no, I won't stand with you, not for power, not for the truth, not for the man's name. But I'm also not going to run to the old fool, because you and Dumbledore fighting over this castle is the most useful thing that could happen to me, and a wise man doesn't interrupt his two enemies while they're busy with each other." He almost smiled. "You came to recruit me. Instead you've told me you're weak, you're hunting something here, and you want me badly enough to beg. That's 3 things. I came with nothing, and I'm leaving with 3. Good night, Professor. Do put the stammer back on. It's a good stammer." He turned his back on the most dangerous thing in the castle and walked away down the dark corridor, every nerve screaming that the killing curse would take him between the shoulders before he reached the stair. And it did not, because the thing behind Quirrell could not yet afford to murder the boy who lived in a school full of witnesses with a body it did not fully control, and Harry had known that, had bet his life on the arithmetic of it, and the arithmetic had held. Behind him in the dark the cold, sweet smell faded, and a thing that had not been refused so cleanly in a decade watched the child go, and felt something it had not felt for an 11-year-old since a night in Godric's Hollow, which was the first faint stirring of respect, and under it deeper, the colder thing that always followed Lord Voldemort's respect like a shadow follows a flame, which was the decision to one day destroy what he could not own. Harry did not stop shaking until he reached the 2nd floor. Then he stopped and breathed and put it away and went to find Daphne, because some things you do not survive alone twice. "You went anyway," Daphne said. She had been waiting in an alcove off the dungeon stair, and she did not say "I told you not to," which was its own kind of mercy. "You're gray. You're actually gray, Potter. You've got no color in your face. What happened?" "I refused the other king," Harry said to his face in the dark. "And he let me walk away, which means I was right about how weak he still is, which means we have more time than I feared." He leaned against the cold stone and let himself, for one moment, in front of the one person in the world he had decided to trust, simply have been afraid. "I've now told both of the most powerful wizards in Britain that I won't be theirs in 1 week. I want you to understand what that means, because you signed on to this, and you deserve to know what you signed on to." He met her eyes. "It means we have no protector. None. Dumbledore won't shelter us because I refused his cause, and the dark won't shelter us because I refused its offer, and every other power in this castle takes its cue from one of those two. We are entirely, completely alone, and the only wall between us and either of them is how useful and how dangerous we can make 40 children before they decide we're worth the trouble of crushing." Daphne was quiet a moment. The torch in the alcove threw her face into halves. "You're telling me this to give me the exit clause," she said slowly. 30 days, no reprisal, you're handing it to me. You think I should take it. I think you should know it's there and that no one would think less of you and that I'd write the 30 days myself and mean every one of them. Harry's voice had gone low. "I refused 2 kings without asking you first. That was a violation of the terms. Equal means equal, and I made the biggest decision of our lives alone in a corridor. So I'm telling you everything now, the true shape of the danger, and I'm reminding you the door's open, because that's what equal means when the equal thing is also the frightening thing." Daphne Greengrass looked at the gray-faced boy who had walked alone into the dark to refuse a Dark Lord and come back to offer her first thing an honest way out, and she did the thing that sealed the alliance more completely than any term they had written, which was to laugh low and real. "You absolute idiot," she said, with enormous fondness and no softness at all. "You think I came in for the safe option. I'm a Greengrass. We've spent 200 years being alone between kings. It's the family trade. Difference is we did it to survive, one bloodline at a time, hiding. You want to do it out loud for 40 people and dare them to stop you." She pushed off the wall. "I'm not taking the exit. I'm insulted you offered." But in here, just for a moment, the glass came off the iron, the one warm beat she would allow herself, stated once and never to be relitigated. "Thank you for telling me the truth when the lie would have been easier and kept me. That's the thing I signed for, not the kingdom, that. Keep doing that and you'll never be rid of me." "That's the plan," Harry said, and the color was coming back into his face, and the two of them stood a moment in the half-light of a dungeon torch, the only 2 people in the castle who belonged to no king, and it was enough. He told the Bloc the next night, all of it, the part that could be told. They gathered at the window table after the firing had gone up. Not Zabini, Tracy, Daphne, and 3 of the little ones Tracy had begun to draw in, second years who sat at the edge of the lamplight clutching the dignity of having been invited. Harry did not soften it for them. "I went to the headmaster on Tuesday," he said, "and I told him I'd never be his. I'm telling you because by the weekend the whole castle will half know it, and you should hear the true version from me before you hear the frightening one from someone else. Dumbledore wanted me for the light. I said no. He let that sit. And there's a second power in this school, an old one, and it wanted me too, and I said no to that as well. I'm not going to tell you what it is, because knowing would put you in danger you haven't agreed to, and I don't spend people's safety without asking. But you should know that we now stand against both of the great powers in this country, and neither of them will protect us, and that is exactly the position my family has spent 200 years surviving." He nodded at Daphne, giving her the line because it was hers. "Bend to no king. We've all said it like a slogan. Starting tonight it's a fact, and it has a cost, and the cost is that we have no one but each other." Nott's face had gone pale and still. "My father's friends," he said quietly. "When they hear a Nott has joined a house that refused the Dark Lord's heir, because that's what they'll call it choosing against him, they'll come for me. Not in 7 years, now letters, pressure. My father has ways to reach me even from Azkaban." "I know," Harry said. "That's why I'm not asking any of you to refuse the dark out loud the way I did. That would be brave and stupid, and it would get the children of Death Eaters killed for my principle, and my principle isn't worth your lives. Here's the structure instead, and listen, because this is the thing that keeps you alive." He laid his hands flat on the table. "You don't refuse anyone, you're neutral. When your father's friends ask, you say your house is full of gray families and you're keeping your head down, which is true, and which is exactly what a clever Death Eater's son ought to do, so they'll believe it. You never have to declare. The declaring is my job. I'm the boy who lived. I can afford the target. It's the one use that scar has ever had. You hide behind my noise. While everyone's watching me refuse 2 kings in the open, you build the thing quietly in the dark, and no one ever has to know that neutral for us isn't fence-sitting. It's a side. It's the third side. It just never says so." He looked around the lamplit table at the wary boy and the mercenary and the warm girl and the frightened second years, and at Daphne beside him, and said the thing that turned a nucleus into a body. "Neutrality with teeth," Harry said. "That's what we are, not we won't take a side. We've taken one, ours, and it's the only side in this war that's actually trying to keep its own people alive instead of spending them. The old man will spend you for his cause, the dark will spend you for its power. We won't spend you at all, that's the whole offer, and it's the only offer in this castle that's true." He let it breathe. "You don't have to swear anything. I don't want oaths. Oaths break and shame people. I want you to wake up tomorrow and notice you slept easier in our corner than you've slept since you got here, and decide for yourselves what that's worth. That's all. That's the whole religion. Go to bed." They went, the little ones first, walking taller than they had come. And Theodore Nott lingered at the foot of the stair and turned back and said, in the flat voice he used for things he meant, "My father always said the strong protect no one but themselves, and anyone who tells you different is selling you a leash." He looked at Harry. "He's been wrong about most things. I'd like him to be wrong about that one too. Don't make me a fool for hoping it." "I won't," Harry said. Page 2, written down, 40 people between him and you. I don't break what's in the book, Nott. The book is the one thing I have that the kings don't, which is a promise that's actually kept. Not nodded once and went up, and the window table was empty but for the two of them and the green dark of the windows and the ledger between them, and Harry opened it and looked at the country they had drawn, larger now, and Daphne looked at it with him. "We've made it real," she said. "It's not a clever idea anymore. It's a thing with people in it who'll be hurt if we're wrong." She closed the book. "That changes the math, Harry. Up till tonight, if we lost, we lost. Now if we lose, not loses, and the second years lose, and they trusted us to be right." Her eyes came up. "Are you sure, truly? Because I'll follow you into it either way, but I want to hear you say you're sure with the children's faces fresh." Harry thought about the corridor and the cold, sweet smell and the old man's pale, recalculating eyes and the weight of the thing he was building, and he gave her the truth because the truth was the whole arrangement. "No," he said, "I'm not sure. I think I'm right. I think the third side is the only one that keeps these particular children alive, and I think both kings are too busy with each other to crush us before we're too useful to crush. But I'm 11 and I'm guessing, and the guesses have people's lives in them now." He met her eyes. "That's why it's you, not because you'll agree with me. Because when I start mistaking my cleverness for certainty, and I will, it's the failure I'm built for. You're the one who will put the children's faces in front of me and make me look. Keep doing that. It's worth more than the whole block." Daphne held his gaze a moment, and the warm beat passed between them again, unspoken, and then the glass came back over the iron because they were, after all, in public, even here. "Get some sleep," she said. "You look like something the lake spat up. And Potter," she paused at the stair, "Malfoy-'s been writing home every night this week. 3 owls in 4 days. Whatever Lucius told him to do about us, the instructions are coming. We've got maybe a fortnight before the first of it lands." "Good," Harry said. "Let it land. We've spent a week becoming impossible to ignore. Now we find out what being noticed costs." He closed the ledger on the country of 40 names. "The kings have both seen us. The Malfoys are about to move. We're done being small." He looked at the green dark of the lake windows, and the boy who belonged to no one looked almost at peace. "Now we find out whether we built the floor strong enough to stand the weight of being seen on it." Severus Snape found him before the Malfoys did. It was the end of a potions lesson, the other students filing out into the corridor, and Snape said, "Mr. Potter," a word in the tone that was not a request, and Harry stayed while the dungeon emptied and the door swung shut on its own. "You visited the headmaster on Tuesday." Snape did not look up from the essays he was savaging with a red quill. He does not summon first years to his office for lemon drops, not even famous ones. Particularly not famous ones. The quill stopped. The black eyes came up. What did he want? It was a probe, and a real one, and Harry weighed how much to give and decided the truth was cheaper than a lie Snape would catch. "He wanted me to promise to be the lights when the time comes. I refused." Harry kept it flat. "You're my head of house. I'd rather you heard it from me than from him." Edited. Something passed behind Snape's face, quick and complicated. "You refused Albus Dumbledore," he said. To his face at 11. "I refused everyone who's asked, sir. I expect that includes refusing whatever you're about to ask, so let's save us both the time." Harry met the black gaze without flinching. "But here's the part you actually want to know, since you're caught worse than anyone in this castle, and nobody has said it to you plainly. You're his man, you owe the headmaster something old, and you pay it by serving him. And you're our head of house, which means when the Dark family's sons in this dungeon get leaned on, you're the wall that's supposed to stand between them and it. Those two jobs are about to start pulling in opposite directions, and you know it, and it's been costing you sleep since the feast." He let it sit. "I'm not asking you to choose. I'm telling you there's now a third thing in your house that protects Slytherins without answering to either king, and that the day your two masters pull too hard, you'll have somewhere to look the other way that isn't a betrayal of either of them. That's all. I don't want your loyalty. I want you to remember, when it matters, that I made your impossible job slightly more possible." The silence in the dungeon was absolute. Snape set down the red quill, and for a long moment he simply looked at the boy, at Lily's eyes and James's face, talking sense no 11-year-old had any right to talk, and the wariness in him went somewhere deeper and more permanent than dislike. "You are a dangerous child," Snape said at last, very quietly, and it was not entirely an accusation. "I'm a careful one. The danger's only to people who'd rather I weren't." Harry shouldered his bag. "If a boy in your house comes to harm this year, sir, it won't be one of mine. Mine are looked after. I'd ask you to remember that too when the accounting comes, that the children who slept safe in this dungeon slept safe in our corner of it. Good afternoon, Professor." He left, and Severus Snape sat a long while over his butchered essays without reading them, having been offered by a first year the one thing his cleft life had never given him: permission someday to do the right thing and call it neutrality. The doctrine was tested that same week, and it was Tracy who brought it to the table, her warmth gone hard at the edges. "Tobin Ashcroft," she said. "Second year, neutral family, no money, no name, no one. One of mine, he's been coming to our corner since Monday. He was just starting to sleep." She set both hands flat on the wood. "Lucian Avery cornered him in the dormitory stair tonight. Avery's a fourth year and his uncle S in Azkaban with Nott's father, and he's decided that a frightened nobody second year is exactly the sort who ought to be running errands for the Dark family's little circle, carrying messages, watching people, the start of a leash." Her eyes came up bright and furious. Tobin said no because he's ours now and he was brave about it, and Avery told him neutral families don't get to say no and put him into the wall hard enough to leave a mark and said there was more where that came from. He's 12, Harry. He's been ours for 4 days and he's already paying for it. The table went quiet, not had gone very still because Avery was exactly the kind of threat he had named. Zabini looked bored, which meant he was paying complete attention. And Harry felt the cold thing rise in him that he kept for moments precisely like this and let it. This is the test, Harry said. Everything we said this week is just words until the first time someone touches one of ours and finds out what it costs. If we get this wrong, the doctrine dies tonight, and every frightened child in our corner learns that our protection is a story. So we get it right, and we get it right in a way the whole house reads, and we do it without me ever raising my voice because the day I have to shout is the day I've already lost. He turned to Nott. Avery, what does he want more than he wants to lean on a 12-year-old? To matter, Nott said immediately, the weather report ready. His uncle's the disgraced branch caught, broke, name in the mud. Lucian's whole life is trying to be taken seriously by the families that still have standing. The Malfoys won't have him. He's a 4th-year nobody pretending he's connected, and everyone knows it and it eats him alive. Then we don't threaten him, we embarrass the threat right out of him. Harry's voice was very even. Daphne, your family's owed a courtesy by half the old houses, including, if I read page 1 right, the Selwyns, who Avery has been desperate to be invited to dine with for 2 years. Zabini, your mother knows everyone worth knowing and owes nothing to anyone, which means a word from her travels. Here's the move. He laid it out clean. By tomorrow night, 3 separate older students from 3 respectable neutral houses mention, in Avery's hearing in the common room, that they've heard the Potter Circle has taken an interest in young Ashcroft. And isn't it interesting how the families one actually wants to be connected to are the ones standing with the Greengrass girl and the boy who lived these days? Nothing about the stare, nothing about the bruise. Just the suggestion in front of everyone Avery wants to impress that leaning on our people is the mark of a desperate nobody, and that the connected, clever thing to do, the thing that gets you invited to dinner, is to stay well clear of anyone under our protection. Daphne's mouth curved. You're not punishing him. You're making cruelty toward our people socially expensive. You're teaching the whole house that touching us marks you as low. Avery's a nobody who's terrified of being seen as a nobody. So we make hurting our people the single most nobody thing you can do in this dungeon. Harry looked around the table. And then this part matters. Tomorrow at breakfast, Tobin Ashcroft sits at our table, in the open, next to Tracy, eats his eggs where the whole hall can see that the boy Avery shoved is the boy the Potter Circle keeps close. We don't say a word about why. We don't have to. Avery will look at that table and understand that he put his hands on something protected in front of everyone and got nothing but smaller for it. That's neutrality with teeth. We never threatened him. We just made sure the house watched him lose. Tracy was already on her feet. I'll tell Tobin, he'll be terrified. Tell him the truth, Harry said. Tell him he was brave, and that brave cost him a bruise, and that this is the part where he finds out it bought him 40 people. Tell him to sit up straight at breakfast and let them look. He paused, and the cold went out of his voice, replaced by the thing underneath it that the Kings did not have. And Tracy, make sure he understands he's not a lesson we're teaching. He's a person we're keeping. The lesson's just what keeping him looks like from outside. He matters more than the message. If he ever thinks it's the other way round, we've become the thing we're fighting. It went exactly as he had drawn it. By the following evening, Lucian Avery had heard, from 3 directions, in front of everyone he wished would respect him, that the connected families kept clear of the Potter Circle's people, and he had watched a bruised second-year eat breakfast under Tracy Davis's wing while the dungeon noted it, and Lucian Avery, who wanted nothing in the world but to be taken seriously, discovered that the one reliable way to be taken for a desperate nobody was to lean on anyone Harry Potter had decided to keep. He never touched Tobin Ashcroft again, neither did anyone else. And the frightened bottom half of the house, who had heard the pretty words about a safe corner and quietly disbelieved them, watched a nobody second year get shoved into a wall on Monday and sit untouchable at the center table by Wednesday, and learned the only lesson that ever truly recruits the powerless, which is not that a protector is kind, but that a protector is real. Far above the lake that same night, 2 letters crossed in the dark over England. One flew north to a stone island in a cold sea, where it would be read by a thin gray man through bars, and where the name Nott would be spoken aloud in a place that forgot nothing and forgave less. The other flew south to a great pale manor in Wiltshire, where a man with a silver-headed cane read his son's frightened, spiteful account of a boy who lived who had refused the Malfoy hand and taken the Greengrass girl and was building a house inside the house, and Lucius Malfoy set the letter down beside his fire and did not frown, because frowning was for men who had not yet decided what to do. Lucius Malfoy had decided. He poured himself a glass of something old and dark, and considered the 11-year-old who had insulted his blood and was, the letter said, organizing the neutral families against the natural order. and he smiled very slightly, the smile of a patient man who has just been handed a project worthy of his patience. So, he said, to the fire, to the manor, to the long memory of a war he had survived by being cleverer than the men who lost it. The boy wishes to play the game at 11. He turned the glass in the firelight, then let us teach him what the game costs. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. First move Marcus Flint came to collect in the second week of October, which meant Harry had read him correctly. A man who owes a debt and means to pay it comes to you eventually to find out the price. You said you knew someone. Flint dropped onto the bench across from the window table, too big for it, a clipboard in his fist. My seeker problem. You said we'd talk. We're talking. I've got a hole in my team in the first match against Gryffindor in 3 weeks and a reserve who falls off the broom looking at the ground. He set the clipboard down. And I've got a different problem on top of it, which is why I'm here and not waiting for you to come to me. Malfoy, Lucius or Draco, both, which is the problem. Flint's slab face was sour. Draco wants the seeker spot. Can't fly worth a damn, he's competent, not special, I've watched him, but he wants it because his father wants a Malfoy on the team. And Lucius Malfoy has sent the captain, meaning me, a very generous letter. New brooms, 7 Nimbus 2000s, top of the line, enough for the whole side, a gift to Slytherin House. To be delivered, Flint said with the flatness of a man quoting a thing he despises, upon confirmation that the team's new seeker has been selected from among, and I'm reading this, the families whose support has long sustained the house. Meaning Draco, the brooms come if Draco flies, no Draco, no brooms. He looked at Harry. I want the brooms, we're flying clean sweeps held together with hope. But I'm not handing the most important position on my team to a boy who can't catch a cold so his father can buy my house, and I'm not in a position to tell a school governor to go hang, because he can have me off this team with one letter to the board. So, you're clever, everyone says so, be clever at this. It was, Harry understood, a gift far larger than the one Flint thought he was asking about. The captain had not come for a seeker. He had come because he was caught between a bribe he wanted and a humiliation he refused, and he had decided to find out whether the famous first year was actually as useful as the dungeon had begun to whisper. It was a test wearing the clothes of a favor. Harry had been waiting a month for exactly this kind of test, the kind that passed in public turned a curiosity into a power. Give me the letter, Harry said, and give me 3 days. And don't answer Lucius Malfoy until I tell you what to write, because the wording's the whole game and one wrong sentence puts you on a leash you'll never get off. He took the cream paper Flint slid across, read it once, and felt the shape of the thing assemble itself behind his eyes, clean and complete. Marcus, when this is done, you're going to have the brooms, a seeker who actually wins, and the satisfaction of watching Lucius Malfoy pay for all of it and get nothing he wanted. But you have to do exactly as I say, and you have to hold an open tryout, and you have to mean it. Can you do that? Flint looked at him for a long moment. You can do that, make Malfoy pay and get nothing. I can make his own gift do it to him, Harry said. He's written a check that assumes everyone in this house thinks money buys position. We're going to cash the check and prove they don't. 3 days, Marcus. Trust me, 3 days. Marcus Flint, who trusted no one, looked at the 11-year-old holding Lucius Malfoy's letter like a card he'd been dealt and decided that the dungeon's whispers had been, if anything, conservative. 3 days, he said. Don't make me regret it, Potter. I've got a long memory and a heavy hand. I'm counting on the first one, Harry said. Daphne, the ledger, we have a campaign to run. The plan he laid out for the block that night had 4 moving parts, and he walked them through it the way a general walks subordinates through a battle that has not happened yet, so that when the chaos came each of them would already know their piece. Lucius Malfoy's gift has a flaw, and the flaw is that he tied it to a condition he stated in writing, Harry said. He thinks the condition is leverage. It's actually a noose, and he put his own neck in it, because a condition in writing is a thing you can satisfy in a way the writer didn't intend. He spread the letter on the table. He wrote that the brooms come when the seeker is selected from among the families whose support has long sustained the house. He means Draco, but that phrase doesn't say Draco, it says a family that's supported Slytherin. And there are a dozen old neutral families that have quietly sustained this house for centuries without ever asking for anything, including, he nodded at Daphne Greengrass, and including a name Tracy brought me this morning. Tracy lined in, lit with it. Hesper Folly, 3rd year. The Follies are old, sacred 28 neutral, never took a side in either war, but the branch she's from lost its money 2 generations back, so she's a poor relation in a rich family's robes, and nobody's ever looked at her twice. Tracy's eyes shone. Except I've watched her on a borrowed broom at dawn when she thinks the pitch is empty, and Harry, she flies like she was born 3 feet off the ground. She's the best flyer in this house and probably this school, and no one knows because she's neutral and poor and quiet, and there's no faction behind her to make noise about it. So she's perfect, Harry said. She satisfies Lucius's exact written condition, an old family that's long sustained the house while being everything he didn't mean. We don't refuse the brooms. Refusing free brooms is stupid, and it lets Lucius play the wounded benefactor. We accept them gratefully publicly as a generous gift to the whole house from a great family, and then we hold an open, fair tryout that his own condition technically permits, and the best flyer wins it, and the best flyer is Hesper Folly, and Draco loses on merit in front of everyone. He let it settle. Lucius pays for 7 brooms. The house gets a winning seeker. And the lesson the entire dungeon learns watching is that in Harry Potter's Slytherin, money buys you a gift, but it does not buy you a position. Position is earned in the open on the broom. That's the first move. That's the whole doctrine made visible in one afternoon. Not who missed nothing said quietly, Lucius will see it coming. He'll know exactly what you've done with his phrasing the moment Folly's name comes up. He'll move to stop the tryout, or pull the brooms, or lean on Flint. Yes, Harry said. He will, and that's the second half of the plan, because a move your enemy can't counter isn't a move, it's a fantasy. Lucius is going to fight this, and when he does, every option he has makes him look worse than the last. If he pulls the brooms, he's the governor who snatched a gift back from children because he didn't get his way in front of the board, in front of the house, pettiness on a Malfoy scale. If he leans on Flint to cancel the tryout, Flint tells the house the captain was ordered to rig the team, and a captain who's seen to be honest gains more than he loses. If he demands Draco be named without a tryout, he's confessed in public that his son can't earn it. Harry looked around the table. We're not going to beat Lucius Malfoy. We're going to hand him a board where every move loses and then let him move. The only thing we have to do is be ready for whichever losing move he picks and turn it into the next thing the house watches him lose. Zabini, indolent and attentive, said, And Draco, you keep saying you leave him a door. Where's his door and a plan that humiliates him on a broom in front of the school? It was a good question, the kind Harry kept Zabini for. Draco's door is the one thing we offer him that his father never will, Harry said, dignity in the loss. When Folly beats him, and she will, I'm going to make sure the story the house tells is Malfoy couldn't fly. It's Malfoy lost to the best flyer in Britain, which is no shame, and took it like a gentleman. We hand him that story for free because a humiliated Draco does something stupid and dangerous, and a Draco who's been allowed to lose with his pride mostly intact just nurses his resentment quietly, which is exactly where we want it. We don't crush him. We let his father crush him by being the one who set him up to fail, and then we're the ones who soften the landing. Every time the house learns that Malfoy money breaks Malfoys and Potter mercy catches them. That's worth more than the win. Daphne had been writing in the ledger throughout, the campaign reduced to initials and arrows, and now she looked up. There's a hole. Pansy Parkinson runs Malfoy's gossip network, and she's not stupid, and the moment we start moving Folly's name around, she'll know what we're doing and she'll counter it. She'll get to Folly, spook her, bribe her, threaten her, spread a story that she's a Potter plant and the tryout's fixed. The whole plan runs through a quiet third year who's never had a faction and won't know how to stand the pressure when Parkinson turns it on her. That, Harry said, is the part I need you and Tracy for, and it's the part that matters most. Folly isn't a piece on the board. She's a frightened girl who's about to be shoved into the middle of a Malfoy war, and if we treat her like a tool, we deserve to lose. Tracy, you bring her in gently tonight and you tell her the truth, all of it, the brooms, the trap, what we're asking, what it'll cost her, and that she can say no and we'll find another way. Daphne, you make her understand that whatever Parkinson throws at her, she's not standing alone, that there are 40 people behind her and she only has to fly. We don't push her onto the board. We ask her honestly, and if she says yes, we make sure she never once feels she's by herself out there. He closed the letter. If she says no, we find another road. The plan is not worth one scared girl's well-being. Term 2 and Term 4, and the whole reason any of this is different from what the Kings do. Are we clear? Clear, said Tracy, already rising. Hesper Folly said yes. She said it after an hour with Tracy in a quiet corner of the common room, after the truth had been laid out plainly and the danger named and the exit offered twice. And she said it not because she wanted to humble Draco Malfoy and not because she cared about the brooms, but because Tracy Davis had been the first person in 3 years to look at her dawn flying and call it what it was, which was a gift, and to offer her a place where the gift would be wanted instead of overlooked. That was the recruiting that worked on the powerless, and Harry had built the whole block on it, and it held now when it mattered. And then, exactly as Daphne had predicted, Pansy Parkinson moved. It began as a whisper and grew into a story by the second day, that the tryout was a sham, that Potter had already chosen his pet, that the Folly girl was a half-talented charity case being propped up to insult the Malfoys, that anyone who flew against her was wasting their time because the result was fixed. It was a clever attack because it did not need to be true to work. It only needed to put enough doubt in the air that when Folly won, the house would mutter that of course she won, it was rigged, and the victory would curdle in the telling. Pansy had understood that you do not beat a fair fight by cheating. You beat it by convincing everyone afterward that it was never fair. She's good, Daphne admitted, grim, at the window table. She's poisoning the result before it happens. If the house believes the tryout's fixed, winning it proves nothing, and your whole merit beats money lesson dies, because everyone decides it was money all along yours instead of Lucius's. It was the reversal Harry had known would come, and it had come sharper than he'd planned for, and he sat with it a moment and let himself feel the cold, clean pressure of a plan meeting a real opponent, because Pansy Parkinson had just done something genuinely good, and he respected it even as he set about destroying it. Then we don't run the tryout, Harry said slowly, the new shape assembling. We change what the tryout is. Pansy's poison only works if I'm the one choosing the seeker, because then fixed means fixed by me. So I take myself out of it completely. I don't pick the seeker, I don't judge it, I don't go near it. He looked up, and there was the cold flicker of pleasure that came when an opponent's good move opened a better one. Marcus Flint picks the seeker. The captain, who everyone knows wants nothing but to win the cup, who has no reason on earth to favor a neutral third year over a Malfoy except that she's better. And the tryout isn't judged by eye where bias can hide. It's a race, a measured one time, the snitch released, and whoever catches it fastest across 3 runs wins. Numbers anyone can read, with the whole house watching, and a stopwatch that doesn't care about anyone's blood. You can't fix a stopwatch. You can't poison a number. He stood. Enzi bet that I'd be the judge so she could call it rigged. So I give the judging to the one man whose only loyalty is to winning, and I make the result a thing you can count instead of a thing you have to trust. Her whole attack assumed I'd keep control of the outcome. I'm going to win by giving the control away. Not exhaled, something like awe in it. You're letting go of the result to prove the result's clean. The result was always going to be folly, because folly's the best, and the best wins a fair race. I never needed to control the result. I only needed the house to believe the race was fair, and the way you make people believe a thing is fair is to visibly give up the power to fix it. Harry was already moving. Tell Flint, open race, timed 3 runs, public Saturday. And put the word out everywhere, Tracy, the whole network, that Potter's recused himself entirely, won't judge, won't watch from anywhere near the captain, that the only judge is the captain and the stopwatch. Make Pansy's its fixed story collide with Potter gave up all control of it until the 2 stories cancel each other out. By Saturday, the only question left in the house is who flies fastest, and we know who flies fastest. Pansy Parkinson came to him directly on the Thursday, which told Harry the Whisper War was already failing, and she knew it. She sat down across the window table uninvited, in the seat that had become a kind of confessional for the dungeon's powers, and she did not pretend to be friendly, which Harry respected. She was a sharp-faced girl with a clever mouth and eyes that had spent 11 years learning to read a room for Draco Malfoy's benefit, and she had finally understood that the room had stopped being Draco's to read. You took my story apart, she said, the fixed tryout story. It was good, and you took it apart in a day by giving up the judging. I want to know how you knew to do that. Because your story only worked if I cared about controlling the result, Harry said, and I don't. I care about the house believing the result was clean. You attacked the thing I didn't need. People always attack the thing they'd be protecting in your place. It's the most common mistake there is. You'd never give up control, so you assumed I wouldn't either. He looked at her with something close to respect. You're the best mind in Malfoy's circle, Pansy, easily. You're wasted running gossip for a boy who's going to lose this house, and you know it, which is why you're sitting here instead of whispering. Her jaw tightened. Don't recruit me. I'm not one of your strays. I'm not recruiting you. You'd say no today because your whole position is built on Draco and you're not ready to admit the position's collapsing. Harry leaned back. I'm telling you something true so that when you're ready, you'll remember I said it without asking for anything. You've hitched your cleverness to a boy whose father just bet his name on a contest his son can't win. When Draco goes down, and after Saturday he starts going down, everyone who built their standing on him goes down with him, except the ones who saw it coming and had somewhere else to stand. He let it breathe. I'm not offering you a place tonight. I'm telling you the door doesn't close, and that the day you decide you'd rather be a power in your own name than an enforcer in someone else's, you come find this table. That's all. Now go warn Draco the tryout's going to be a stopwatch, because you owe him that, and because it won't help him, and because watching him fail to fix something he can't fix will teach you faster than anything I could say. Pansy Parkinson stared at him a long moment, furious and unsettled, and underneath both, listening. Then she stood without a word and walked back to the firing, and Harry watched her go and knew he had not won her, and had done something more useful than winning her, which was to put a crack in her certainty that she would carry for the rest of the year, widening on its own until the day it opened into a door. You just told Malfoy's own strategist exactly how the tryout works, Daphne murmured. I told her it's a stopwatch, which she'd have learned Saturday anyway. What I actually did was show her that I saw her, really saw her, the mind under the gossip, when Draco's used her for 11 years and never once has. Harry watched Pansy take her place at Draco's elbow and laugh her half-secondarly laugh, hollow now where it had been reflexive. That's the recruiting that works on the overlooked, and Pansy's overlooked in the worst way, by people who think they own her. We don't need her now. We'll need her by spring. Today I just made sure that when we reach for her, she'll already half belong to us and not know when it started. The pressure on Hesper Folly came that same night, and it was worse than the whispers because it was personal. Tracy brought her to the table after curfew, and the bright dawn flyer of the borrowed broom was gone, In her place was a frightened third year who had spent 2 days being the subject of a war she had never asked to join. Someone had jinxed her bag, so her books spilled in a corridor full of laughing upper years. Pansy's people had been telling anyone who listened that she was a charity case being propped up to insult a great family, that she'd be a laughingstock when she lost, that a poor folly reaching above her station was exactly the kind of thing that ended badly. And the worst of it, the thing that had actually broken her nerve, was an anonymous note left on her bed that said only, "Neutral families that pick sides don't stay neutral long. Ask the Knots." "I can't do it," she said, and her hands were shaking around the mug Tracy had pressed on her. "I didn't sign up for it, I just wanted to fly. I don't want to be the thing two families fight over." The note, "They know about my family, they know we've got nothing, one more enemy and we're—" She stopped and looked at the table full of people who had pulled her into the open, and her voice went small and accusing and entirely fair. "You did this to me. I was nobody and I was safe, and you made me a target so you could win a point against Malfoy. That's all I am to you, a piece." The table was silent. And Harry, who had built everything on the principle that he would not be the king's, felt the truth of the accusation land because it was partly true, because a plan had reached into a quiet girl's safe small life and put her on a board, and no amount of cleverness made that nothing. "You're right," he said, "partly. We asked you onto a board, and being on it hurts, and we should have known the note would come, and I'm sorry it did." He did not reach for charm. He gave her the truth flat because charm would have proven her point. "But here's the part that isn't true, and I need you to hear it because your safety depends on which version you believe. You think you were safe being nobody. You weren't. You were unprotected. There's a difference, and the note proves it. They reached you on your own bed, a quiet neutral girl with nothing, because nobody who was nobody's. The Knots the note threatens. Theodore Knott sleeps safer tonight than he has in his life because he's one of ours, and one of ours means 40 people stand between him and exactly the kind of threat that note is. That's not what we did to you. That's what we're offering you, not a board, a wall." He held her eyes. "Saturday you cannot fly. Say the word and it's done, no reprisal, and we find another road and you go back to dawn flights on a borrowed broom alone. Or you fly in whatever Parkinson throws. You're not alone out there, not for 1 second, because the entire reason this block exists is so that frightened people with nothing stop having to face the powerful by themselves. The note threatened you to scare you off the wall. Don't let it. Walls are exactly what it's afraid of. It was Daphne who finished it, because some things land better from the cold one." She leaned across the table, and the glass came off the iron for the second time that month, and she said, "I'm a Greengrass. My family invented being neutral with nothing but our wits and each other between us and the men who wanted to eat us. I know exactly what that note feels like, Hesper, because my grandmother got the wizarding version of it in 2 wars and stayed standing both times, not by hiding smaller, but by being worth more to keep than to break. That's what we're making you. Worth too much to touch. You won't be a poor folly reaching above her station. You'll be the best flyer in this school with 40 people and a cup-winning team behind her, and the next note they think about leaving on your bed, they'll think about who they'd be answering to." She sat back. "Fly because it's yours. We'll carry the rest. That's the deal, and unlike Lucius Malfoy's, ours is written so it can't be turned inside out." Hesper Folly looked around the table at the warm half-blood girl who had seen her fly, at the cold heir who had just confessed her own family's fear to steady her, at the famous boy who had told her the plain truth instead of flattering her, and at the wary not boy across from her who looked up from his book and said quietly, "The note used my name to frighten you. Use mine back. Tell whoever left it that the Knots and the Follies stand in the same corner now, and the corner has teeth." It was the most Theodore Knott had volunteered to a stranger all term, and it did what nothing else had. It made Hesper Folly understand that the wall was not a metaphor, that there were real frightened people in it who had decided to be frightened together, which is the only courage that ever holds. "Okay," she said. Her hands had stopped shaking. "Okay, I'll fly." She looked at Harry. "But if you ever treat me like a piece again, if I ever find out the wall was just a story you told to win, I'll know, and I'll go, and I'll take the whole truth of how you really work with me." "That's term 1, Daphne said almost gently. "He's heard it before, from me. Welcome to the people who get to say it to him." Saturday came gray and high and cold, the pitch silver with frost burning off, and the whole of Slytherin House came out to watch, which was the first sign that Harry had already won the part that mattered, because a house that turns out in the cold to watch a tryout is a house that has decided the tryout means something. 6 flyers had put their names in. 3 were upper years who knew within one run that they were out of their depth and flew their hearts out anyway, because the stopwatch was honest, and honesty is its own kind of dignity. The 4th was a competent 5th year who posted a real time and grinned, knowing it wasn't enough and glad to have flown clean. The 5th was Draco Malfoy. He flew well. Harry, watching from the stands with the rest of the house and pointedly nowhere near Flint or the stopwatch, gave him that honestly. Draco flew well, better than Harry had expected. A boy who had been put on a broom at 6 and drilled by tutors, precise and controlled and fast, and his first run posted a time that drew a real murmur from the crowd and put a flush of hope in his pale face. He thought for the length of that run that he might actually win it. The murmur fed him. He flew his second run harder, chasing the released snitch in a tight, clean arc, and posted a time better than his first, and the Malfoy faction roared, and Draco landed, lit up with the belief that the spot was his and his father had been right and money and breeding had bought a Malfoy his place after all. Then Hesper Folly flew. She had borrowed a school broom, the worst on the pitch, because the new Nimbuses had not yet arrived, and she had refused the loan of a better one on the grounds that she wanted to win on the broom she'd be honest about, and Harry, watching, understood that Tracy had been wrong about only one thing, which was the comparison to being born 3 feet off the ground, because Hesper Folly did not fly like something born to the air. She flew like something the air had been waiting for. There was no precision in it the way there was precision in Draco. There was something better, the thing that cannot be tutored. She did not chase the snitch, she went to where it was going to be, reading its gold stagger the way Harry read a room, already turning before it turned, so that the whole flight looked less like a pursuit than like a girl gathering up a thing that had always been hers. Her first run beat Draco's best by 4 seconds. The pitch went silent. Her second beat her own first. And on the third run, with the whole house on its feet and the stopwatch ticking and no faction behind her but a half-blood girl screaming her name from the stands, Hesper Folly took the snitch out of the cold gray air in a vertical climb so steep the crowd gasped, hung for a heartbeat at the top of it against the white sky, and came down with her fist closed and the gold wings beating against her fingers, and Marcus Flint looked at his stopwatch and then at the sky and then bellowed. To the whole of Slytherin House the only word that mattered, Seeker. The dungeon's roar took her up, and it was not a polite roar, not a faction's purchased cheer. It was the genuine, astonished delight of a whole house discovering it had a champion it had never bothered to notice, and the roar was for Folly, but the lesson under the roar belonged to Harry, and everyone who could think felt it land. The best flyer had won in the open on the worst broom, judged by a stopwatch and a captain who wanted only victory, with the famous Potter nowhere near the deciding of it. There was nothing left for Pansy's poison to cling to. You cannot whisper that a race was fixed when the winner flew a school broom and beat a Malfoy by 7 seconds in front of 400 eyes. Draco stood on the frosted grass and watched his house carry a poor neutral third year on its shoulders, and the flush of hope drained out of his face and left something Harry had been watching for, which was the dawning, dreadful understanding that his father had set him up, had staked the Malfoy name on a contest his son could not win, had written a condition so clever it had been turned inside out, and had left Draco standing alone on the pitch as the boy whose father tried to buy him a spot he wasn't good enough to earn. It was the cruelest thing that had happened to Draco Malfoy in his life, and his own father had done it, and Harry had only held the door open and let Lucius walk his son through it. So Harry came down out of the stands and crossed the pitch, and gave Draco the one thing the boy had left to lose with. That second run, Harry said, loud enough for the nearest of the crowd to hear, his voice clean of any triumph, was the best flying I've seen from anyone in our year, by a distance. You lost to the best flyer in Britain on a day she was unbeatable. There's no one alive who'd have caught her today, Draco, no one, and everyone who watched it knows it. He held the gray eyes and pitched the next part lower for Draco alone. Your father set you up. He bet your name on a fixed phrase in a contest he should have known you couldn't win, and he left you out here to wear it. That wasn't yours, that was his. The house saw you fly like a Malfoy ought to fly and lose to something no one could beat. Take that and walk off with your head up and let them remember the second run, not the result. That's the version that's true, and it's the one I'll make sure they tell. He stepped back. You're better than the man who sent those brooms. Today proved it. Pity he wasn't here to see what he wasted. It was, Daphne told him later, the most ruthless, kind thing she had ever watched anyone do, to comfort a rival in a way that turned the rival's grief permanently against his own father, to hand Draco a dignity that came with a hatred of Lucius pre-installed, to be merciful and devastating in the same breath. Draco took it because there was nothing else to take. He walked off the pitch with his head up, and the house let him, because the boy who lived had told them to remember the second run, and a house tells the story its most interesting member hands it. And somewhere under the wreckage of his afternoon, Draco Malfoy carried away a small new seed of fury at his father that would grow all year, and Harry had planted it with his own hand and called it kindness, and it had been both. The brooms arrived on Monday. 7 Nimbus 2000s, delivered to the Slytherin team with a note in Lucius Malfoy's looping hand about the proud families that sustained the house, and Marcus Flint accepted them publicly, gratefully, in the common room, with a speech Harry had written for him that thanked the great and generous house of Malfoy for its gift to all of Slytherin, and then handed the finest of the 7 brooms to Hesper Folly, the neutral third year who had won the Seekers' spot fair and open on a school clean sweep. So that the entire house watched a Malfoy gift carried off by the exact person Lucius had tried to write out of existence. Lucius Malfoy had paid for 7 brooms, lost the position, humiliated his son, and bought with his own gold the single clearest demonstration in living memory that in this Slytherin, merit beat money. There was no move left that did not cost him more than the last. So he made the only move a clever man makes when every option loses, which was to say nothing, and accept the thanks and begin, in the silence of his manner, to take the 11-year-old who had done this to him entirely seriously at last. Gemma Farley, the sixth-year prefect who had watched the whole thing unfold with the calculating patience of a girl who would run a department someday, found Harry at the window table that night and sat down without being asked, which from a sixth year to a first year was nearly a coronation. "That was the cleanest piece of work I've seen in this house in 5 years," she said. "You took a governor's bribe, gave the house a cup-winning seeker, made Malfoy money pay for a lesson against Malfoy money, and didn't leave a fingerprint anyone can point to. The little ones think Folly did it, half the upper years think Flint did it. Only the people at this table know it was you, and that's the part that frightens me." She studied him. "I'm a prefect. I've got a vote in the room you don't get to see until you're older, where the house decides things that never reach the common room. There are people in that room starting to ask what you are. I came to find out before I have to answer." Her eyes were level. "So, what are you, Potter?" "I'm someone who'd rather this house belonged to itself than to a governor in Wiltshire," Harry said simply. "That's the whole of it. I don't want your room, Gemma. I don't want your vote. I want a Slytherin that can't be bought by either of the men about to fight over Britain, because I'm tired of watching grown wizards spend children as currency, and this is the only house with the spine to refuse it if someone shows it how. You asked what I am. I'm the person showing it how. You can be in that or against it, but you watch today. You already know which way the floor's tilting." Gemma Farley looked at him a long moment, and then she stood and she said, "I'll tell the room you're not a problem," which was the largest thing she could have said, and she said one thing more before she went. "There's a war coming back, isn't there? That's what all this is. You're not playing. You're building a thing to survive something the rest of us haven't let ourselves believe is real." She did not wait for an answer. "Keep your floor strong, Potter. I think we're all going to need somewhere to stand." She went, and the window table sat quiet a moment in the green dark, and Daphne opened the ledger and turned to a fresh page and wrote at the top in her good hand a single line and turned it so Harry could read it. It said, "First move. House of Malfoy, -7 brooms, -1 son's faith in his father. House of Potter, +1 seeker, +1 prefect, plus Flint, plus the whole bottom half, plus the house's belief that we are real. Cost 1 whisper war 1 rival made permanently dangerous." "That's one," Daphne said. "That's one," Harry agreed and looked at the line, and at the country grown larger around it, and at the girl across the table who had told him 3 days ago exactly where the plan would break, and then helped him build the bridge across the break. Smooth, and it landed clean, and the whole house watched us do something both kings would have done with money and threats, and we did it with a stopwatch and the truth. He closed the book. Snape noticed. He stopped me after dinner, didn't say anything about the brooms, just said the house had been unusually quiet and unusually organized this month, and looked at me like he was deciding whether quiet and organized was better or worse than the noise he was used to. "And what did you tell him?" "That a quiet house is a safe house, and that I'd have thought a head of house would be glad of it." Harry almost smiled. He said safe houses are the ones with the most to hide. Then he gave Slytherin 10 points for the Quidditch result and walked off before I could decide if he was warning me or thanking me. He looked at the green windows, the lake black behind them. "He knows what we did, he knows what it means, and he hasn't told Dumbledore, which is the only thing I needed to learn tonight." He stood. "One move down, the kings have seen us refuse them. Now they've seen us win. The difference between this week and last week is that last week we were a curiosity, and this week we're a power, and powers don't get watched anymore, Daphne, they get answered." He looked down at her in the lamplight. "Lucius lost today. He's not a man who loses twice without changing the game. Whatever comes next won't be a letter and a bribe, it'll be the real thing." He picked up the ledger, the country of names heavy in his hands. "Get some sleep. We've won the first move. Now we find out what the board does when the other side stops playing nice." Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. Enemies notice Lucius Malfoy came to Hogwarts in the first week of November, and he came in daylight through the front gates with the authority of the Board of Governors at his back, which was how Harry knew the time for letters and bribes was over. The official reason was an inspection. The board had concerns, the notice said, about discipline and standards, and a governor would spend 2 days observing the school. The real reason walked the corridors in robes of charcoal silk with a silver-headed cane he did not need, greeting professors with the exact warmth required and no more, and it found Harry, as Harry had known it would on the second afternoon, alone, by arrangement that was made to look like accident. "Mr. Potter." Lucius Malfoy's voice was a cultured instrument, every note placed. How fortunate. I had hoped to make the acquaintance of the young man who has so enlivened my son's letters home. Up close he was handsome in the cold way of a portrait, and his pale eyes did to Harry what Snape's had done on the first night, except that where Snape had been wounded, Lucius was merely thorough. "You are smaller than I imagined. The famous are so often a disappointment in person. And yet you have managed in 2 months to make a great deal of noise for so small a thing. You came a long way to inspect a school you've already decided about, Mr. Malfoy," Harry said. Shall we not pretend it's about discipline? You're here because I cost you 7 brooms and your son's faith in you, and you'd like to look at me before you decide what to do about it. So look, I'll wait." Something flickered behind the pale eyes, and it was not anger. Lucius Malfoy smiled very slightly, the smile of a man who has reached for a sparring partner and found a blade. Direct, how refreshing and how young. The directness will leave you in time or it will leave you dead. The two outcomes are not as different as the brave believe. He drew the cane's tip in a slow line along the stone windowsill. "Let me be equally direct since you have asked it. You have made a toy of the neutral families. You have gathered the Grey House's children into a little parliament under the lake and taught them to fancy themselves a power. It is charming and it is going to stop, and I will tell you precisely how, because I find that the young learn best when the lesson is itemized." He turned, and the November light lay gray on his hair. "You have built your house, Mr. Potter, on the willingness of frightened neutral families to stand with you. Frightened families have interests. Interests can be made to ache." "You're threatening their parents," Harry said. "Business, standing, marriages. The things the neutral families spent 2 wars protecting by belonging to no one. I am explaining arithmetic. The Folly girl's family holds a lease on land my interests have lately acquired. The Davis child's father imports potion stock through channels the ministry could be persuaded to examine. The little Ashcroft boy's mother has a position at Gringotts that depends on the goodwill of patrons such as myself." His name fell like a coin onto the sill. "I have not threatened anyone, you understand. I have merely allowed certain families to become aware that their children's enthusiasms have been noticed by someone whose displeasure is expensive. Some of them will weigh a boy's friendships against a family's future, and they will choose the future because that is what neutral families do. It is the whole of their philosophy, the philosophy you have so cleverly armed against me. They bend to no king, Mr. Potter, including you." The smile returned. "I am simply the wind that reminds them which way the grass lies." It landed, and Harry let it land without flinching, because flinching told a striker where you felt it, and he had learned that from a thin boy in a library. But under the flat attention he kept on his face, the cold understanding arrived that Lucius Malfoy had just done something genuinely formidable, had found the load-bearing wall of the entire block and set a charge against it, using the block's own founding principle as the fuse. Neutrality with teeth could refuse a Dark Lord and a headmaster. It was far less sure of itself against a governor who could quietly ruin a family's livelihood, because that was the precise fear the neutral families had organized their whole existence around, and Lucius had aimed at it with a marksman's economy. "And the Greengrasses?" Harry asked, because he needed to know the worst of it. "You'll have left them for last since they're the keystone." Ah, Lucius's pleasure was genuine now. "You do understand the board. The Greengrasses are not frightened. That is what makes them valuable and what makes them vulnerable. Cyrus Greengrass is a careful man with 2 daughters and a name 3 centuries old, and he has spent his life keeping that name out of other men's wars. And now his elder daughter has been seen at every meal beside the most provocative child in Britain, building something that has made an enemy of the House of Malfoy." He let the cane rest. "I have written to Cyrus." "Not a threat." Cyrus would answer a threat with a war, and I have no quarrel with Greengrass, only with you. I have written as one careful father to another, to wonder aloud whether his daughter's prominent friendship serves the family's long neutrality or endangers it. Cyrus will read that letter and feel the cold draft of his own doctrine, and he will do what neutral fathers do. He will tell the girl to step back. The pale eyes settled on Harry with something almost like sympathy, which was worse than malice. "Your whole edifice, Mr. Potter, rests on a girl whose family's entire genius is the avoidance of exactly the kind of attention you have brought to their door. I have not had to break your alliance. I have only had to remind it what it is." He inclined his head, the inspection of the famous toy complete, and went to find the headmaster, and left Harry standing alone in the gray November light with the understanding that the war had begun in earnest, and that the first shot had been beautifully placed, and that it had gone straight through the one wall he could not afford to lose. The damage came over the next 4 days, exactly as itemized, and it came faster than Harry's confidence had let him fear. The Ashcroft boy went first. Tobin's mother, who held her Gringotts position at the goodwill of patrons such as Lucius Malfoy, wrote her son a frightened, loving, unanswerable letter, and Tobin Ashcroft came to the window table with his eyes red, and could not look at Tracy while he said that he had to stop, that his mum would lose everything, that he was sorry, that he'd thought the wall was real. And Harry, who had told him the wall was real, sat with the cost of having been partly wrong and did not make the boy feel worse for choosing his mother over a doctrine. "Go," he said gently. "You were never a piece. Your mother comes first, and anyone who told you different was selling you a leash. The corner stays open if it's ever safe to come back." Tobin went, and the bottom half of the house watched the bravest of the little ones get pulled out by a governor's quiet word, and a chill went through the floor Harry had built, because the floor had just learned it could be reached. A second-tier neutral family pulled their daughter the next day. A third wavered visibly, the children going quiet at meals, sitting a seat further from the center each morning. Tracy worked herself ragged, holding the bottom half together, and held most of it, but not all, and most was a wound where 2 weeks ago there had been a wall. Then Daphne got the letter from her father. She read it at the window table without expression, which was how Harry knew it was bad, because Daphne performed unconcern only over things that had landed. She set it down between them, face up, an act of transparency that cost her something, and Harry read Cyrus Greengrass's careful, loving, ruinous hand, a father reminding a daughter what the family was, what neutrality had bought them across 2 wars and 3 centuries, what attention cost. It did not order her. Cyrus was too wise to order a Greengrass. It simply laid the family's whole philosophy in front of her and asked, gently, whether the pot of friendship served it, and closed by reminding her that her sister Astoria would be starting Hogwarts in 2 years, into whatever world Daphne's choices had made for the name. "He's not wrong," Daphne said flat. "That's the worst of it. He's using Astoria, which is cheap, but the rest isn't cheap, it's true. We have stayed alive for 300 years by not being where the lightning strikes, and I have walked us directly under the cloud, and if this goes wrong, it isn't only me who pays, it's the name. It's Astoria starting school as the other Greengrass girl, the one whose sister ruined them." She looked at Harry, and the glass was very firmly on the iron. "I need you to know that this is the one pressure that can actually move me, not fear for myself, the family. He's found the only lever I have, which is exactly what makes him good at this, and I won't lie to you and say it isn't working." It was the moment the alliance had been built to survive and had never yet been tested by, and Harry understood that everything depended on what he did in the next 60 seconds, and that the wrong move, a plea, a guilt, a clever argument for why she should stay, would prove he was, in the end, just another man who spent her. So he did the only thing the arrangement allowed. "Then take the exit," Harry said quietly. 30 days, no reprisal, I'll write it tonight. If protecting the name in Astoria means stepping back, step back, and I'll make it look like your idea so the house reads it as Greengrass wisdom and not as a defeat for us. I mean it, Daphne. Term 3 exists for exactly this. I won't be the man who made you choose between me and your sister." Daphne looked at him for a long moment, and something moved behind the gray, and it was not relief. "You absolute idiot," she said, and her voice had gone rough at one edge. "You've done it again. You've handed me the clean way out the second it got real because you'd rather lose me than hold me, and that." She stopped and steadied and went on lower. "That is the entire reason I'm not going to take it." She put her hand flat on her father's letter. "Lucius thinks neutrality means we run from lightning. It doesn't. It means we don't kneel to the men who throw it. My father's forgotten that. He's mistaken hiding for the doctrine the way frightened men do, bend to no king. Lucius Malfoy is trying to be a king over the Greengrass name, and the family answer to a king trying to bend us has never once been to bend." Her chin came up. "I'm going to write to my father, not the answer he wants. I'm going to remind him that the Greengrasses have outlived 11 Malfoys by being the family that doesn't flinch first, and that Astoria deserves to inherit a name that bent to no one, not a name that folded the moment a Malfoy raised his voice." She met Harry's eyes. "But I'm telling you it cost me to choose, and that you'll owe me for it, and that the day you ever treat my staying as a thing you were owed instead of a thing I chose, I'm gone and the name be damned. Are we clear?" "Clear," Harry said, and the one emotional beat passed between them, the partnership not broken but proven, tempered in the exact fire it had been forged against. "And Daphne, thank you isn't enough for what you just did, so I won't insult it by saying it. I'll do the other thing instead. I'll make sure Lucius loses so completely that Cyrus Greengrass reads about it and understands his daughter bet on the right family." He stood. "Now. He's hit the neutrals, and he's hit you, and he's hit the little ones. 3 blows in 4 days. There are 2 more coming because he's thorough, and I can see exactly where, and we're going to be standing on them when they land. The 4th blow fell on Theodore Nott, and it did not come from Lucius. It came from Azkaban. Nott's father had ways to reach his son. The boy had said so on the first night, and now the ways were used. It was not a letter. Letters could be read. It was a message carried through the Dark Circle's children, through the Carrow cousins and Avery's bruised resentment, and the anonymous hand that had once threatened Hesper Folly. A thing left on Theodore's bed, his father's signet pressed into black wax over a single line. "A son who stands against the Dark Lord's house when the Dark Lord rises will be counted among the traitors, and the traitors will be the first remembered." There was a second object beneath the wax, a small one, a cursed trinket of the old domestic kind that did nothing but ache, a charmed splinter of bone that filled the boy's sleep with the cold of the island prison and his father's certainty, night after night, so that Theodore Nott began to come to breakfast gray and hollow and unable to say why, until Tracy, who heard everything, heard it. "It's psychological," Daphne said, examining the bone splinter at arm's length with a handkerchief, refusing to touch it. "It's not meant to harm him. It's meant to wear him down until he comes home on his own, until he decides the only way to make the cold stop is to put on the coat. It's how that family breaks people, not with force, with patience and the certainty that they own you." Her eyes were hard. "It's working. Look at him. 3 nights and he's a ghost. 3 weeks and he'll go back to them just to sleep." And Harry looked at Theodore not across the dungeon, the first one who had chosen, the boy he had written on page 2 and promised 40 people between him and exactly this, and he felt the cold rise that he kept for the moments that mattered most, because the protection promise had just been called in for real under fire, by an enemy who had aimed at the one recruit whose loss would tell the whole house that Harry Potter's wall was a story after all. "They've found the seam," Harry said low. "Lucius leans on the neutrals through their parents, and the dark families lean on their own children through their fathers, and Dumbledore's about to lean on me from the front, and it's coordinated, Daphne, or near enough. They've all noticed at once, and they're all cutting at once, and every one of them has aimed at exactly the load-bearing thing. The Greengrass Alliance, the little one's safety, the first recruit. They are not testing us anymore. They're trying to bring it down." "Zabini's the fifth," Daphne said quietly. "You said 2 more after the neutrals and me. Not's 4, where's 5? It came that night, and it came as the cleverest blows do, dressed as a kindness." Blaise Zabini received a letter from his mother, the rich and ruthless woman who had buried 7 husbands and taught her son the price of everything, and the letter contained an offer that Lucius Malfoy had routed through exactly the channel a mercenary respects, not a threat, but a better deal. The Zabini and Malfoy interests, his mother wrote, had found occasion to align. There was advantage in it for the family, a marriage prospect for a cousin, a trade concession, a door into society that had been closed. The price of the advantage was small. Blaise need only be seen to drift from the Potter circle, gradually, gracefully, as a clever boy's enthusiasms naturally cool, nothing so crude as betrayal. Merely the recognition, which his mother had raised him to make, that the wind had changed and the better deal lay elsewhere. Zabini brought the letter to the window table himself, which Harry chose to read as the best possible sign and knew might be the worst, and laid it down with his usual indolence and his usual complete attention underneath it. "You told me on the first night," Zabini said, "that you wanted the only kind of loyalty worth having, which was the kind you could verify, because I'd leave the day you stopped being the best deal in the room." He tapped the letter. "My mother is offering me a better deal, a real one, verifiable. More advantage than you can match, because you can't match it. You've got a ledger and a doctrine and no gold and a governor cutting your legs out from under you, and she's got an aligned Malfoy interest and an open door into the houses that matter." His dark eyes were level. "So here's the test you built, Potter, arriving exactly when you said it would. By your own terms, I should walk. The deal's better. Tell me why I shouldn't, and don't insult me with loyalty or friendship, because you promised you never would, and the day you start is the day I stop believing the rest of it." It was the fairest challenge anyone had put to him all term, built precisely out of the principle Harry had handed Zabini in good faith, and Harry felt the cold clarity of a man being beaten with his own honesty and respected it, and answered with more of the same, because it was the only currency that had ever worked on Blaise Zabini. "You're right," Harry said. "By the terms, you should walk. The deal's better today. I'm not going to pretend it isn't, because you'd catch the lie and that would cost me more than losing you." He leaned in. "So I'll tell you the one thing the deal doesn't price, and then you decide, and I'll respect whichever way you go. Your mother's offer is better today because Lucius is winning today. He's cutting us and we're bleeding, and a smart mercenary sells a stock that's falling. But ask yourself why Lucius rooted this through your mother instead of just letting you drift on your own. He didn't need to buy you, you were always free to leave. He spent a real concession, a marriage, a trade door, things that cost him to make sure you left now this week while we're down." Harry held his eyes. "He's not paying to acquire you, Blaise. He's paying to take you from me at the exact moment it hurts most, because he knows that if Zabini walks while we're bleeding, the whole house reads it as the rat's leaving, and 3 more families pull their children by Friday. You're not being offered a better deal. You're being used as a blow. The most expensive thing you own is being bored, and Lucius Malfoy has just made you the instrument of another man's move and dressed it up as your advantage. A mercenary who lets himself be spent as someone else's weapon isn't a mercenary. He's a tool that thinks it chose." He sat back. "That's the whole answer. The deal's better. But taking it means letting Lucius play you this week on his timing for his reasons. Walk if you want. But walk knowing you'd be his move, not your own. You taught me your mother's first rule yourself. Never take the first deal, because the first deal benefits the other person. This is his first deal. It benefits him. You do the math." Blaise Zabini was silent for a long moment, and his indolence had gone entirely, and what looked out from under it was the genuine cold intelligence his mother had built. He picked up the letter and read it again, and Harry watched him see it. The timing, the routing, the concessions spent to land a blow on Harry rather than to win Blaise, and watched the mercenary's pride, the one lever Harry could actually pull, recoil from the discovery that he had nearly let himself be made an instrument. "She thinks I won't see it," Zabini said slowly, with the first real anger Harry had ever heard from him. "My own mother. She thinks I'm a piece on Malfoy's board, and she's collecting the fee for delivering me." He folded the letter with precise contempt. "I'm not loyal, Potter. I told you that going in, and it's still true. But I'm nobody's instrument, and Lucius Malfoy just tried to make me one, and the single thing I will pay any price to avoid is being used by a man who thinks I'm too bored to notice." He met Harry's eyes. "I'll stay, not for you, to spite him. He spent a marriage and a trade door to move me, and I'm going to make it the worst spent gold of his year by not moving. That's verifiable enough for you." "That's the most honest loyalty in the castle," Harry said, "and it's worth more than the bought kind because you'll renew it yourself every time Lucius gives you another reason. Welcome to still being here, Blaze, page 3. Nothing's changed except that you've cost Lucius a concession for nothing, which is the first ground we've taken back all week." 2 of the 5 blows had landed clean, Ashcroft gone, the neutrals fraying. 2 had been turned, Daphne holding, Zabini staying out of spite, and 1 was still bleeding into Theodore not sleep, a splinter of charmed bone wearing down the first boy who had ever chosen, and Harry had no answer for it yet because you could not out-argue a curse, and the wall he had promised was, for the first time, being asked to be more than a clever arrangement of social pressure. It was being asked to actually protect someone from the dark, and Harry did not yet know if it could. Before the homily, Dumbledore tried the gentler thing, because great men always reach for kindness before they reach for the public knife, and because the kindness refused is what gives them permission to use the knife at all. He summoned Harry again the evening before the feast, and this time there was no lemon drop on the desk and no twinkle laid on thick. Fawkes watched from his perch half in molt, and the silver instruments ticked their small lies, and Albus Dumbledore looked older than he had in October and sadder and entirely deliberate about both. "Sit, Harry, I will not keep you long." The blue eyes were grave. "I am told you have had a difficult fortnight. The Ashcroft boy, pressures upon the neutral families, a certain coolness from the Greengrasses, perhaps. The young man has not been sleeping." He folded his long hands. "I want you to know that I see it, I see all of it, and I want you to know that it grieves me." "Does it?" Harry said. It was not quite a question. He had come into the room reading it, and the first thing the room told him was that Dumbledore had listed, gently and precisely, every blow Lucius had landed, which meant the headmaster knew the exact shape of the Malfoy campaign in detail and had done nothing to stop a single piece of it. "It does." Dumbledore did not flinch from the flatness. "Think me complicit because I have not intervened. You are half right, and I would rather you heard the whole of it from me than constructed a darker version alone. I have not lifted a finger to shield your little parliament from Lucius Malfoy. I will not because I wish you harmed, I would be wretched to see you harmed, but because the pressure you are under is, Harry, the most honest teacher you will ever have." He leaned forward. "You have set yourself against the natural currents of this world. You have refused the light and refused the dark, and declared that an 11-year-old will stand alone between 2 storms and protect 40 children by his cleverness alone. And now the world has answered, as it always answers such declarations, and it is showing you what standing alone costs. I am letting it teach you. Because when the lesson is finished, when the boy not has gone home to his father's house because you could not keep the cold out of his sleep, when the Greengrass girl has been called away to protect her sister, when your floor has fallen through one frightened family at a time, you will understand what I have always known, that no one stands alone, that the only shelter from the storm is to belong to something larger than yourself. And on that day, Harry, my door will be open, and there will be a place beside me, and the pressure will stop, because the boy who chooses the light is no longer a problem the world needs to solve." It was, Harry understood, the true move at last, and it was breathtaking in its patience. Dumbledore was not fighting the Malfoy campaign, he was using it. He had let Lucius become the storm precisely so that he, Dumbledore, could be the shelter, had arranged, without arranging anything, that every blow Harry took would push him 1 inch closer to the open door of the only man kind enough to make the cutting stop. The Malfoys cut, Dumbledore would heal, and a boy who had been cut enough would walk into the healer's arms and call it his own free choice. "You're letting Lucius blade me," Harry said slowly, "so that I'll come to you to make it stop. You're not my rescuer, you're the reason rescue is on offer. You've made yourself the only warm room in a house you're helping to freeze. I am offering a child a way out of a war he is too young to be fighting," Dumbledore said, and the terrible thing was that he believed it, that there was real love in the old face, that he was not lying about the grief or the open door. "Take it, Harry, not for me. For the not boy who is suffering tonight for your principle. For the Greengrass girl who is choosing between you and her family. You speak of not spending people. Look at what your refusal is spending. Every one of them is paying right now for your insistence on standing alone, and you could end their suffering in a single sentence. Come to the light, let me lift the weight, and all of those children you say you will not spend stop bleeding tonight." He sat back. "That is not a threat. It is the most generous offer you will ever receive. I am asking you to be saved." And there it was, the trap closed and beautiful. The demand that Harry surrender, reframed as compassion for the very people his surrender would betray, so that refusing the cage looked like cruelty to his own. Harry sat with it and felt the genuine pull of it, the real and dreadful weight of Theodore not sleepless face set on the scale against his own stubbornness, and he understood that this was the most dangerous thing Dumbledore had done yet, more dangerous than the homily that was coming, because it was aimed not at his position but at his conscience. He refused it anyway, and he refused it on the ground the old man had chosen, because that was the only refusal that would hold. "No," Harry said. I'll tell you exactly why, since you made it about the children, which was clever and cruel and the first genuinely cruel thing you've done to me, however gently you said it. He kept his voice level. If I walk through your door to make not suffering stop, I teach all of them that the way you end pressure is to kneel to whoever's strong enough to apply it. I teach them that their safety was always conditional on my obedience, that the wall was only ever as real as my willingness to fold. And the next time a powerful man wants something from them, they'll remember that when it got hard, Potter knelt and they'll kneel too, because that's the lesson I'll have taught with my own surrender. He held the blue eyes. You're right that they're paying. You're right that I could stop it tonight. But the thing I'd buy their comfort with is the only thing I actually have to give them, which is the proof that a person can refuse the powerful and not be crushed. Spend that, and they're safe tonight and owned forever. Keep it, and they bleed tonight and they're free. He stood. I won't be saved into a cage and call it shelter, and I won't end their suffering by teaching them that suffering is what you trade away your spine to avoid. You taught me something tonight, sir, and I thank you for it because it's the most useful thing I've learned all term. You'll let children bleed to make a point about belonging. That's not the dark, but it's close enough to the dark that I finally understand why I won't be yours. Dumbledore did not rise to see him out. He sat very still among his ticking instruments, and Fawkes loosed a single low note, and the old man said almost to himself, "You are going to be either the saving of this country or its ruin, and I no longer know which, and that is the first time in 40 years I have not known." His eyes came up, and there was no anger in them, only a vast and patient sorrow. "I had hoped to do this gently. You have refused the gentle way. Remember, when what comes next is less gentle, that I gave you the door first." "I'll remember you offered me a cage and called it a door," Harry said. "Good night, headmaster." He left, and behind him the most powerful wizard in Britain made the decision he had been hoping to avoid, which was to stop being only the shelter and to become, as well in the open, before the whole school, a part of the storm. And the next night he rose at the Halloween feast and gave the homily that walled the block into the dungeon, and Harry, hearing it, understood that it was not a new blow at all, but the old one made public. The patient man, having finally accepted that this particular child would not be saved into the light and would therefore have to be made, gently and regretfully and in front of everyone, to look a little like the dark. The homily came at the Halloween feast, held late that year after the inspection, the hall hung with floating candles and the long tables groaning, and it came not as an attack but as a kindness, which was how Harry knew it for the most dangerous blow of the five. Dumbledore rose to speak, and he spoke warmly of unity, of the four houses as one family, of the danger of letting old divisions harden into faction. And then gently, sorrowfully, with his eyes never once turning toward the Slytherin table, he spoke of how it grieved him to hear that some among the students had begun to organize themselves into blocks and parliaments and circles of power, to teach children to think of themselves as separate from the school, as belonging to no one but each other. And how such thinking, however well meant, was the very soil in which the last war had grown, and how he hoped so very much, that the young people of Hogwarts would choose the light of the whole over the cold comfort of the closed circle. He did not name Harry. He did not need to. The whole hall heard the word Parliament and the word circle and the phrase belonging to no one, which were the block's own words, and 400 faces did not turn to the Slytherin table because they did not have to. And Harry sat in the candlelight and understood that the most beloved wizard in Britain had just stood up, and without telling a single lie, painted the thing Harry was building as the seedbed of the next Dark Lord, in front of the entire school. In the warmest and most regretful voice imaginable, it was masterful. It walled the block into the dungeon as surely as a curse. Every Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff and Gryffindor who might have been a neutral ally in another house now looked at the green table and saw, where there had been a curiosity, a sinister little kingdom the headmaster himself had warned them against. The block could refuse 2 kings. It could survive Lucius's pressure on the parents, given time. But it could not grow beyond the dungeon now, not for a long time, because Albus Dumbledore had spent 10 sentences and the whole of his moral authority to make Harry's neutrality look like darkness. And there was no public answer to it, because to stand up and protest that the Parliament under the lake was not sinister was to confirm there was a Parliament under the lake. That, Daphne said, very low in the candlelight, watching the other houses not look at them, was 5. Her face was composed and her voice was not. Ashcroft gone, the neutrals fraying, not bleeding in his sleep, me holding by my fingernails, and now the whole school has been told by the man they trust most that we're the next dark thing growing under the lake. She turned to him, and for the first time since the first night there was something close to fear in her, not for herself, but for the thing they had built. "They were counting us, Harry. 2 weeks ago they were counting us. That's over." She looked back at the warm, regretful, devastating old man resuming his seat to the hall's applause. "They're done counting. Now they're cutting, all of them, at once, and we are, right now, tonight, losing." Harry looked at the floating candles, and at the applauding hall, and at the gray hollow boy 3 seats down who could not sleep, and at the old man who had just turned a school against him with a homily, and at Lucius Malfoy's empty inspector's chair. and at the place where Quirrell sat fingering the back of his turban and watching the whole thing with patient, hungry interest, and the boy who had walked into this castle knowing exactly what he intended to become did not flinch. Because flinching tells the striker where you feel it, and every striker in Britain was watching him now. Yes, Harry said quietly. We're losing today. On their timing with their blows, all 5 at once, and beautifully done. I'd applaud Lucius and the old man both if I weren't the one bleeding. He set down his goblet, and the cold clarity came over him that always came when the board got bad enough to be simple. Here's what they've all forgotten, every one of them, because they're powerful and they've never had to do this from underneath. They've coordinated their blows, which means they've coordinated their interests, which means for one short while Dumbledore and the Malfoys and the thing in the turban all want the same thing, which is for me to fall. And the moment you get 3 powers that hate each other to want the same thing, you have something none of them has noticed they've made. He looked at Daphne, and the fear in her met something in him that was the opposite of fear. You've made a place where their interests touch, and where interests touch, they can be turned against each other. They've spent this week cutting me. Good, let them. Because they've had to stand close together to do it, closer than 3 enemies have stood in 10 years, and I've spent 2 months learning to read exactly where powers touch, and I'm holding a secret one of them would kill the other 2 to keep. He stood, and the green table's frightened eyes came up to him, and the boy who belonged to no king looked, for the first time all term, genuinely dangerous. They're done counting and they've started cutting. Fine, next, it's my move, and I've been saving it since the first morning of term. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. The power play. The move Harry had been saving since the first morning of term had 3 parts, and he laid them out for the block the night after the Halloween feast in the dungeon with the green windows black behind them and the house frightened all around. Here is the shape of the board, he said. 3 powers are cutting us at once. Lucius from outside through the family's purses. The dark circle from inside through their own children, Not's father with his splinter of bone. And Dumbledore from above through the whole school's fear. They have coordinated, which means for the first time in 10 years their interests are touching. And a thing I learned reading old wars in a cupboard is that powers which touch can be made to cut each other instead of you. We don't have the strength to beat any one of them. We have something better. We have the one secret all 3 of them would spend everything to control, and we're going to use it to make them afraid of each other instead of us. He looked around the lamplit table. I'm going to tell you only what you each need, because what you don't know can't be taken out of you. Trust me, 3 days, the way Flint did. By the end of them, the cutting stops. And the splinter, Not's voice was a husk of itself. He had not slept properly in a week, and the island cold lived behind his eyes now, his father's patient certainty wearing a groove in him. You can flip Lucius, maybe. You can frighten Dumbledore, maybe. But my father reaches me from Azkaban, and you can't out-argue a curse, Harry. It's in my pillow. It's in my blood by now. I'm going home at Christmas, and I'm not coming back, because the only way to make the cold stop is to put on the coat, and we both know it. He looked at the table, ashamed. I chose first. I'd like it on the record that I chose first, before I had to unchoose. You're not unchoosing anything, Harry said, because the splinter comes out tonight, and it comes out the way everything we do comes out, which is that you don't face it alone. He turned to Daphne. You read contract law for fun and curse theory because it's next to it on the shelf. The splinter's a domestic dark object, old family work, the kind that runs on a tether back to its maker's intent. Can it be cut? Not by me. Not safely. The tether snaps back on whoever breaks it untrained, and I'm 12. Daphne's eyes were already moving. But it's not really an Azkaban curse. His father didn't make it from a cell. He had it made before and left instructions for it to be planted. Which means it's keyed to the Knot bloodline to bite and to a maker's hand to release, and there's exactly one person in this castle with the training to unpick old family curse work, and a reason to do it quietly and call it something else. She looked at Harry and understood. Snape, Harry agreed, who told me in so many words that he'd been given permission to do the right thing as long as he could call it neutrality. This is the bill come due, and it's a bill he wants to pay, because a head of house who lets a dark family torture a boy in his own dormitory has failed at the one thing Snape has never failed at, which is keeping his snakes alive. He stood. I'm going to give him the chance to remove a dangerous object from a student's bed as a matter of simple discipline. No politics, no block, just a head of house confiscating contraband. He'll take it because it lets him protect one of his own and owe no one for the privilege, not the splinters out by morning. Page 2. I told you, 40 people, and one of them is the most dangerous man in this castle, and he's about to spend himself on you and call it housekeeping. It went as he said. Harry did not go to Snape as a supplicant or a schemer. He went as a student reporting a hazard, and laid the thing on the desk wrapped in Daphne's handkerchief, and said only that a dangerous object keyed to the dark families, old work had been planted in a Slytherin's bed to break him, and that surely that was a matter of house discipline, and surely the head of house would wish to remove it before a boy in his care came to lasting harm, and surely none of it need ever be a matter of politics. And Severus Snape looked at the splinter of bone, and at the boy offering him a way to do right and call it duty, and a muscle moved at the corner of his mouth, and he said, "Leave it." And tell Mr. Not that the next time a curse object finds its way into my house, he is to come to me directly, and not root it through an 11-year-old with delusions of statecraft." But he kept the splinter, and he unpicked it that night with a skill that took him 3 hours and left him gray, and Theodore Not slept the whole night through for the first time since term began, and woke knowing that the wall had held against the actual dark, not the social kind, the real kind, and that he had been kept. That was the first part, and it bought Harry the Block's whole heart for the harder two. He went to Lucius Malfoy on the second day, alone, in the inspector's study the board had given him for the last hours of his visit, and he went in without fear because he was carrying the only thing in Britain that could make Lucius Malfoy afraid. "You've come to surrender," Lucius said, not rising, the silver-headed cane across his knees. "How sensible. I confess I expected it sooner. The Not boy, I'm told, has been most affecting in his decline." "Not boy slept through the night," Harry said, and sat without being asked, level on the edge. "The splinter's gone. Snape took it. Your inside blow failed this morning, which I expect you haven't heard because news travels slowly to a man on his way out the gate. He let it land, but I didn't come about Not. I came to tell you a secret, Mr. Malfoy, and to watch your face while I do, because the face is how I'll know I've read the board right. Are you ready? It's a short one." He held the pale eyes. "Your master is in this castle, now, tonight. He's weak, and he's wearing a stammering professor like a coat, and he's hunting a thing on the 3rd floor that will make him whole. And I've known since the first morning of term, and I've told no one, and you are the second person in Britain to hear it after me." The change in Lucius Malfoy was the most useful thing Harry had seen all term. It was not large. Lucius did not gasp, did not pale, was far too disciplined for that. But the cane went still across his knees, utterly still, and behind the cold portrait eyes something moved that Harry had not seen there before, which was the specific terror of a man whose whole life is a lie he has not been given time to prepare to drop. "You don't believe me," Harry said, conversational. "You want to. It would explain things, the corridor, the inspection that wasn't about discipline, the way the castle-'s been guarded. But you can't believe it because if it's true, your situation is so much worse than I am that I become the smallest of your problems. So let me itemize it for you the way you itemized me." He leaned forward. 10 years you've spent being the reformed Death Eater, the man under the Imperious, the loyal governor who renounced the Dark Lord and gives to the right charities and is received at the ministry. It's a beautiful lie and you've polished it for a decade." His voice dropped. "And now your master is coming back, weak, yes, hunting his way back, but coming. And when he's whole, he's going to look at his old servants and he's going to ask each of them the only question he ever asks, which is, 'While I was gone, did you search for me, or did you build yourself a comfortable life on the assumption I was dead?' And you, Lucius, you built a manor and a fortune and a board seat and spent this very autumn persecuting a schoolboy to expand your standing, while your master sat weak and hunting in the same castle, and you did not lift one finger to find him because you decided he was gone." Harry let the silence do its work. "He punishes the faithless above all things. You taught your son that. It's in the family. When he learns where you spent the years he was gone, and he will learn, because I am holding the knowledge of exactly where and when he returned with dates in writing, sealed, you will not be the governor who reformed. You'll be the servant who gave up on him, and there is no imperious defense for that, not with him." Lucius Malfoy sat very still in the November dark, and Harry watched a decade of careful survival recalculate itself in real time behind the pale eyes, and knew he had won the second part before Lucius spoke. "And the other knife," Lucius said at last, his voice gone quiet and exact. "You would not bring only one, you have a second, of course." Harry almost smiled. "The first knife is your master, who will kill you for being faithless. The second is Dumbledore, who will have you in Azkaban for being faithful. Because if I tell the headmaster, deniably, through a man we both know carries things to him, that a governor has been improperly pressuring families and visiting the school exactly when a certain old presence has been felt in its corridors, Dumbledore, who misses nothing, starts to wonder why Lucius Malfoy is so very interested in Hogwarts this particular autumn. And Dumbledore, unlike your master, is patient and thorough and has wanted a reason to look hard at you for 10 years. Harry spread his hands. "So here you are. If you keep cutting me, I tell your master where you spent his absence and he ends you for faithlessness. Or I tell Dumbledore to look at you and he ends you for faith. You have built your whole life in the 1 inch of ground between those two men, and I am the boy standing on it, and I can step off it in either direction whenever I choose. That's the board, Mr. Malfoy. You came to teach me what the game costs. Allow me to return the lesson." The inspector's study was silent but for the November wind at the window, and Lucius Malfoy, who had survived one war by being cleverer than the men who lost it, looked at the 11-year-old who had just placed him in a perfect and inescapable fork, and did the thing that clever survivors do when every move loses, which was to stop playing and start dealing. "Terms," Lucius said, and the word cost him more than any word had cost him in years. "Simple ones, and I'll honor them, because a threat you carry out is spent and a threat you hold is forever, and I'd rather hold you than spend you." Harry counted them off. The pressure on the neutral families stops tonight, every family, every lease, every quiet word to Gringotts withdrawn, and you'll find graceful reasons, because you're good at graceful reasons. The Greengrasses are never troubled again. Your letter to Cyrus is followed by a second one withdrawing the first, full of warmth about how you'd misjudged a harmless schoolyard friendship. The dark family's children in this house are called off their own, because you have the standing to do it, and you'll find a pretext. No more splinters, no more notes, no more leashes for the sons who'd rather not wear the coat. And you forget entirely that you ever decided to teach me anything. He stood. Do that and your secret sleeps in me, and neither of your two executioners ever hears a word. You go home to Wiltshire and you wait for your master like a faithful man should always have been waiting, and you thank whatever you pray to that an 11-year-old chose to hold the knife instead of using it. Are we agreed? We are agreed, said Lucius Malfoy, and there was under the hatred the first cold filament of something Harry had not expected to earn, which was a powerful man's genuine recognition of another player, not respect exactly, never that, but the wary professional regard one survivor pays another across a table where one of them has just lost. You are a very dangerous child, he said, echoing two other men who had said it before him. I'm a careful one, Harry said. The danger's only to people who'd rather I weren't. Good night, Mr. Malfoy. Do give my regards to your son. He flew beautifully. It wasn't his fault he lost, it was yours, and I think you know it now, which is the only part of this I take any pleasure in. He left the governor sitting alone with his secret and his ruin averted, and walked out into the corridor, having ended the outside war and the inside war with a single conversation, because he had read correctly 2 months ago that the one thing worth holding was the secret that touched all three powers at once. The third part came for him before he could go to it. It came in the dark of the third-floor corridor on the third night, because the thing behind Quirrell had felt the board shift, had felt Lucius's fear, and the splinters' failure, and the strange new caution in the castle, and had understood with the old quickness that the boy who held its secret had begun, at last, to move. You have been busy, Harry Potter. Quirrell came out of the unlit dark, and there was no stammer, and the torches guttered all at once, and under the smell of cold stone rose the Swedish wrongness Harry had smelled in October. You frightened my servant. The Malfoy creature reeks of it, terror, fresh terror, the kind a man wears when his secrets have been counted. You did that in an afternoon. You have made the faithful coward more afraid of a child than of me, which is a thing I did not believe possible, and which I cannot allow to stand. The pale eyes considered him without mercy. You have grown from a curiosity into a liability. You hold a thing that, spoken in the wrong ear, ends my hunt before it is finished. I cannot leave such a thing in a child's keeping. You understand. I think you have understood since you walked down here knowing I would come. Came down here, Harry said, and his heart was a hammer and his voice was iron, because you needed to hear in person why killing me tonight is the stupidest thing you could possibly do, and I wanted to watch you work it out the way I watched Lucius. So work it out. You're weak. You're a passenger in a borrowed skull, and you can't get whole without the thing on the other side of that door, and you've spent months getting close to it without the old man knowing for certain you're here. The torches strained against the dark. Kill the boy who lived in Hogwarts tonight, and Dumbledore knows, not suspects knows. There is no version of my death that the old man reads as anything but you, and the moment he's certain, he stops being patient, and a certain Dumbledore is the one thing on this earth you still can't beat in the state you're in. My corpse is the telegram that ends your hunt. You don't want me dead. You want me silent, and I've been silent for 2 months for my own reasons, and I'll go on being silent, because 2 enemies fighting over this castle is the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I'd be a fool to interrupt it. He took 1 step back, only one. You came to remove a liability. Instead, I'm going to make you a deal, the same one I made your servant, because you and Dumbledore are doing my work for me, and I want you both to keep doing it. My silence for my life. You hunt your stone, I build my house. Neither of us tells the old man what the other is, and when this year ends, you'll have learned that the one child you couldn't frighten was worth more to you breathing than dead. For a long moment, the corridor hung on the edge of Harry's death, and Harry knew it and stood in it, because he had bet his life on this same arithmetic once before, and it had held, and the only way to make it hold again was to show no fear at all. And then the thing behind Quirrell reached out, a test, a pale hand rising toward the boy's unscarred face, to see whether the threat was real, whether it would dare, and the old magic answered. It came up out of nowhere Harry could name, out of a night in Godric's Hollow he could not remember and carried in his blood all the same, and where Quirrell's fingers came near Harry's skin the air went white-hot and wrong, and the possessed man recoiled with a hiss, his hand smoking, and for one heartbeat the corridor was full of something vast and old and baroque and not Harry's doing at all, a great cold radiance. The after-echo of a love that had burned a dark lord out of the world once and had never entirely stopped burning, rising off the boy's skin like heat off summer stone. It lasted a breath. It was enough. The thing behind the turban understood in that breath that the old protection still lived in the child, that touching him cost, that the night in Godric's Hollow was not finished doing its work, and Lord Voldemort, who forgot nothing and wasted no mind, made the only rational choice left to a weak thing facing an unknown cost, which was to take the deal. Clever, Quirrell breathed, cradling his smoking hand, the stammer creeping back into his voice as the radiance faded, as the corridor became only stone and torchlight again. Clever than the others, clever perhaps than is safe for either of us. Very well, Harry Potter, your silence for your life, hunt your house, I will hunt my stone, and when I am whole again, the pale eyes glittered, we will discover whether the protection of a dead woman is enough to save a boy who has made a habit of refusing me. I look forward to the finding out, now go before I reconsider what I cannot afford to do. Harry went, walking and not running, every nerve screaming, and did not stop until he was 3 floors down and could let himself shake against the cold stone alone, having for the 3rd time in a term walked toward the most dangerous thing in Britain and walked away with his life in a deal. He had turned all 3 powers. Lucius would withdraw. Dumbledore would be made to see Harry as a player who held the castle's true secret, and Voldemort himself was now bound, by his own weakness and the old magic in Harry's blood, to leave the block alone while he hunted. 3 knives held, none spent. It was the move he had been saving since the first morning, and it had landed, and it had nearly killed him, and it had worked. Daphne found him on the stair because she always found him, and she did not ask if he was hurt because she could see he was not, and she did not ask what had happened because she could see it would keep. It's done, Harry said. All 3, the cutting stops tomorrow. He let himself, for one beat, lean on the one person he had decided to trust. I held knives to all of them. I'm still shaking. I want you to know that it worked, and that it cost, and that I'd never have walked down there if I didn't know you'd be on this stair when I came up. Whatever the ledger says I am to this house, you're the thing that's separate from the ledger. I needed to say it once. I won't make a habit of it. Daphne looked at him in the torchlight, and the glass came off the iron for the 3rd and last time that term, and she said simply, then I'll be on the stair, which was the whole of what she felt and all she would ever say of it, and it was enough, and they left it there and went up to count what the move had won. Dumbledore was the hard enemy, and the hard enemy could not be forked the way Lucius had been forked, because Dumbledore held no secret Harry could threaten and feared no master who would punish him. So Harry did not try to corner the old man. He did the harder thing, which was to change what he was in the old man's eyes, and he did it the only way that worked on a mind that had governed Britain for half a century, which was to make himself too valuable to manage and too knowing to deceive. The summons came, as he had known it would, on the last day before the holidays, because Dumbledore had felt the board move under him, had felt Lucius's campaign collapse without cause, had felt the new caution in the castle, and a man who has misplaced a piece always calls it back to look at it. This time Harry did not sit on the edge of the deep, soft chair. He sat back in it because the meeting was different now and they both needed to know it, and he spoke first, which one does not do to Albus Dumbledore unless one has decided to stop being a boy in the room. You've noticed Lucius Malfoy lost interest in destroying me, Harry said. You'd like to know why, because you arranged the pressure as my teacher and the lessons ended early, and an interrupted lesson worries you more than a failed one. He met the blue eyes. I'll tell you part of it, sir, because you've earned a true thing and because I'd rather you spent the holidays understanding me than guessing. I didn't beat Lucius with cleverness. I beat him with a secret I've held since the first week of term, a secret about this castle that you also hold and guard and have decided to let sit in a school full of children because you have a plan for it. He let the old man's face go still. I know what's on the 3rd floor. I know what hunts it. I've known for 2 months, and I have told no one, and I walked past the thing in the dark more than once and came back, and I never once ran to you screaming or to the prophet for the fame or to Lucius for the price of it. I held it, quietly, the way you've held it. Now ask yourself the question you came here to ask, and answer it honestly, because you're the only man alive honest enough to. Dumbledore was silent for a long moment, and the silver instruments ticked, and Fawkes had gone very still on his perch. And what question is that, Harry? The old man asked at last, quietly. Whether the thing you warned the whole school against at Halloween, the Parliament under the lake, the children who belong to no one, the seedbed of the next dark, whether that thing is actually the danger in this castle. Harry kept his voice level and without triumph, because triumph would have made it a boy's speech and he needed it to be a peer's. You stood up in front of 400 students and painted me as the next Lord Voldemort growing in the dungeon. And the entire time you said it, the actual Lord Voldemort was sitting 11 seats down the staff table wearing a turban, hunting the thing you've hidden, and the only student in this castle who knew it was the boy you were warning everyone against. You aimed the whole school's fear at the wrong table, sir. I've been carrying your real danger's secret since October, keeping a panic from breaking that would have ended your plan and sent that thing fleeing to hunt elsewhere, and you thanked me by making me look like the monster. He let it land, soft and total. I'm not angry. It was a good move on a board where you didn't know I could see the whole thing, but you know now. And we both know that a child who holds that secret responsibly for 2 months against every temptation to spend it is not a child who needs saving into the light. He's the most useful ally you have in this castle, and you've spent a term trying to break him because you mistook a player for a piece." It was the most dangerous thing Harry had said to anyone all year, more dangerous than the forks he'd set against Lucius and Voldemort, because it was aimed at the one mind in Britain capable of turning it back on him, and he watched Albus Dumbledore receive it, and watched the great patient face do the thing Harry had been working towards since the feast, which was to stop looking at him as a wayward grandson and start looking at him as a colleague who had arrived, unannounced and unwelcome and undeniable. "At the table where the real game was played, you could have come to me," Dumbledore said slowly, "in October with what you knew. It is what a child is meant to do. It's what a piece is meant to do. A piece runs to the player and hands over its move." Harry held his eyes. "I'm not a piece, sir. I held it because the moment I tell you I know, I become your asset, and your assets get spent. You told me as much yourself. You'll spend a child for a cause and call it the light. I'd rather be the one player in this castle you can't spend, because I see the same board you do and I answer to no one. That's worth more to you than my obedience ever was if you're honest, and you're always honest, even when it costs you." He softened it fractionally, because the old man was still the old man and there was no profit in a wound that didn't need making. "I won't expose your plan. I won't break the panic. I'll go on holding your secret the same as I have, because the thing in the turban fleeing this castle to hunt in the dark where you can't watch it is good for no one, least of all the children I'm trying to keep alive. We want the same thing there, you and I, we just can't be each other's, and I think you finally believe me about that, which is the only thing I came here to accomplish." Albus Dumbledore looked at the 11-year-old sitting back in the deep chair as an equal, and for a long moment the most powerful wizard in Britain said nothing at all, and when he spoke there was no anger in it and no twinkle either, only the grave recognition of a man who has been outmaneuvered by someone he had refused, until that moment, to take entirely seriously. "I have made an error with you," Dumbledore said. "I took you for a boy who needed shelter and pressed upon him until he should seek it, and I find instead that I pressed upon a man in a boy's years and made an enemy where I might have made an ally, because I could not imagine that the thing I needed had arrived 40 years before I was ready for it." He folded his long hands. "I will not make the Halloween mistake again. The school will hear no more of dark parliaments under the lake. I will find gentler words at the next feast, and the fear I aimed at your table will, in time, find somewhere truer to settle. That is the most I can offer, and I offer it not as surrender, Harry, but because you are right that we want the same thing in the one matter that will, before this year ends, matter more than all the rest." The blue eyes sharpened. "But hear me, since we are speaking as players. The thing you hold over Lucius Malfoy, and the thing you balance against the creature in the corridor, and the silence you are keeping for me, you are juggling 3 knives at 11, and the man who juggles knives is admired right up until the day his hands tire. They will not all stay silent forever. When one of them speaks, you will need somewhere to stand that is not the dungeon and not the dark, and on that day, whatever has passed between us, my door will be open, and it will be a door this time and not a cage, because I have learned that you can tell the difference and will not thank me for pretending otherwise." "On that day," Harry said, "I'll remember you offered a door and meant it. That's worth more than the homily cost. Thank you, headmaster." He rose, and this time Dumbledore rose with him, which between a first year and the chief warlock was nearly a treaty. "We won't be friends, but we've stopped being each other's problem, and we both know the same thing is coming, and when it comes I'd rather you knew I'd been keeping your castle's secret than wondered whose side the dungeon was on. That's all I wanted you to carry into the holidays." He left the old man among his ticking instruments, and Fawkes sang a single high clear note as the door closed behind him. And Albus Dumbledore sat a long time in the winter dusk with the discovery that the boy he had spent a term trying to save had, in a single afternoon, made himself the one ally in Britain that Dumbledore could neither command nor afford to lose, which was, the old man reflected with something close to rueful admiration, precisely what the boy had set out to become on the night he had stunned a great hall into silence by choosing green. What it had won became clear over the following week, as the cutting stopped and the block, which had spent a fortnight bleeding, discovered that its enemies had not merely paused but withdrawn, and the discovery changed everything. The neutral family's pressure lifted, lease by lease and word by word, with graceful Malfoy reasons, and the families that had wavered came back sheepish and grateful, and the ones that had stayed stood taller, because they had watched a governor's whole campaign collapse without ever learning why, and had concluded the only thing the watching allowed them to conclude, which was that the Potter block had faced down Lucius Malfoy and won. Tobin Ashcroft's mother kept her position. No one ever told her she'd been in danger of losing it. Her son came back to the corner 3 days later, and Tracy took him in without a word about leaving, and the bottom half of the house, which had learned that the wall could be reached, now learned the more important thing, which was that the wall reached back and held. And Draco Malfoy fell as his faction's foundation crumbled beneath him, because a Malfoy standing in that house had always been alone against his father's power, and his father had just suffered an invisible, total defeat that left Draco somehow diminished in ways no one could name and everyone could feel. The firing thinned. Crabbe and Goyle, who followed strength the way water follows a slope, began to drift toward the warmth and safety of the larger thing, and Harry let them and fed them, because furniture is still furniture and a body needs some, and they were happier fetching for a house that one than for a boy who had stopped. And Pansy Parkinson, whose certainty Harry had cracked in October, came at last to the window table on a gray Tuesday, sat down without being asked, and said only, "You said the door doesn't close," and Harry said, "It doesn't," and Daphne moved over to make room, and the best mind in Malfoy's circle changed tables, and the circle, robbed of its strategist and its patron's power in the same month, ceased to be a circle and became what it had always secretly been. Which was a frightened boy and the people who'd mistaken his father for the son. Snape stopped Harry after the last potions lesson before the holidays, and he did not pretend it was about potions. "The governor's campaign collapsed this month," Snape said low, the dungeon empty around them. "A cursed object left my house of its own apparent accord after I removed it. The Knot boy sleeps, the Malfoy boy does not. And you, Mr. Potter, walk the corridors of this castle at night and return from them alive, which is a thing I would have called impossible, given what I know walks them with you." His black eyes were very steady. "I know what is on the third floor, I know what hunts it. I have known longer than you, and I guard against it, and I had thought myself the only one in this castle young enough to be a student and old enough to see the true board. I was mistaken." He paused, and the contempt was entirely gone now, and what was left was the wary, durable thing Harry had been cultivating since the first night. "I will not ask what you did or how you are still breathing. I will say this once. There is a war beneath the war in this school, and you have somehow made yourself a power in it, and the day is coming when the things I guard against and the things you guard come to the same crisis. When that day comes, Potter," and here Severus Snape said the most that he would ever say to a child he had decided not to despise, "do not be a fool and do not be a hero. Be exactly what you have been all term. Send to me before you act. I find against every instinct I possess that I would rather have you as an ally than mourn you as a waste of your mother's eyes." "Sent before I act," Harry said. "You have my word, sir." "It's the same word I gave you on the first night, and I haven't broken it, and I won't." He shouldered his bag. "An uneasy truce between the two people in this castle who can see the whole board. I'll take it. It's worth more than friendship, because neither of us has to pretend." A muscle moved at the corner of Snape's mouth, the ghost again, and Harry left the dungeon having turned the third force into a quiet ally, the last piece of the consolidation clicking into place. The block gathered at the window table on the last night before the holidays, all of them, the nucleus and the little ones and Pansy in her new chair and Folly with her seeker's confidence, and Not sleeping easy and Zabini bored and loyal out of spite and Tracy at the warm center of it and Daphne at Harry's side, equal, and the country and the ledger had grown until it was no longer a faction in the house, but very nearly the house itself. 6 weeks ago we were 2 people at a window," Harry said, "and a fortnight ago we were losing, and tonight 3 of the most powerful wizards in Britain have agreed, each for his own reason and none of them happily, to leave us alone." He looked around the lamplit table, at the thing they had built together under a lake while 2 kings warred over his head. "I want to be clear about what happened, because the house will tell a dozen versions and I want you to have the true one. We didn't win because I'm clever. We won because we built something neither king understood, a place where people belong to each other instead of to power, and it turned out that a thing like that is harder to break than anyone above us believed, because every blow they aimed at it, they had to aim through a person who decided not to be alone anymore." He closed the ledger on the country of names. "They're done cutting. They've learned what it costs. And the next time they look down at the dungeon, they're not going to see a problem to be solved or a child to be saved. They're going to see a power that holds its own and answers to neither of them, and they'll have to deal with us as what we are." He looked at Daphne and at all of them. "We set out to take this house. As of tonight, the house is ours. Now we find out what it's like to keep it." Far above the lake, 3 men who hated each other sat awake that night in 3 separate rooms, and each of them thought about the same 11-year-old, and not one of them had told the others what the boy held over him, and each believed himself the only one the child had cornered. And that, more than any single knife, was the masterstroke Harry had built since the first morning of term. 3 powers, each silently certain he alone was compromised, each therefore unwilling to compare notes with the others, each leaving the boy alone for fear of what the boy would say to the other 2. He had not defeated them. He had made them keep his secrets for him, out of terror of one another, and in doing so had made himself the one fixed point around which all 3 of them now had to move. The snakes had a master, the masters had a problem, and the long game, which Harry had started alone in a cupboard by lamplight, had, by the first Christmas, become a game the whole board was being forced to play on his terms. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. Master of the Snakes. Harry came back from the holidays to a house that had changed while he was away, and the change was the kind that does not announce itself, the kind you feel the moment you walk into a room and find it has rearranged itself around your absence. The window table was no longer where the block met everywhere. In the 6 weeks since the cutting stopped, the thing he had built in a corner had quietly become the weather of the whole dungeon, the little ones doing homework in safe clusters, the neutral family's children sitting wherever they pleased, the upper years bringing disputes to be settled not to the prefect's notice board, but to whichever of Harry's people happened to be nearest, because Harry's people gave fairer answers and remembered them afterward. The firing by the hearth, which had been the center of Slytherin for as long as anyone could remember, had become just a fire with some chairs around it. The center had moved, and it had moved without a coup, and that was the most dangerous kind of moving, because you cannot overthrow a thing that was never seen to take power. You feel it, Daphne said, watching him take the room in. She had come back 2 days early, and the dungeon had already reformed around her presence the way it reformed around his. It happened over the holidays. Half the house stayed for Christmas, and there was nothing for them to organize around but us, and by Boxing Day they'd stopped pretending it was temporary. We don't have a faction anymore, Harry, we have a house. The question you asked in December, what it's like to keep it, we're about to find out, because you can't unbecome the center once you are it. Then we make it formal, Harry said. Not loud, formal. A thing the house recognizes instead of a thing it drifts into, because a power that's never named can be unmade by the next clever child who names a different one. We've spent a term taking Slytherin. This term we make Slytherin ours in a way that holds after we're gone. He looked at the green windows, the lake black behind them. But first we settle Draco. You don't leave a broken rival lying in the road. You either bury him or you bind him, and burying him makes a martyr and a lifelong knife, so we bind him, and we do it in a way that lets him keep enough of his face to be useful instead of vengeful. Draco Malfoy had spent the holidays in a manner where his father would not meet his eyes, and he came back smaller and harder and entirely without the sun he had orbited, and Harry let him sit alone with it for a week before he went to him, because a proud boy must be allowed to feel the bottom of the fall before he'll take a hand up. He found Draco in the dormitory in the early dark, and he sent Crabbe and Goyle out with a look they obeyed before they remembered they were supposed to be Dracos, which was its own quiet cruelty and its own quiet point, and he sat on the next bed uninvited as he had once sat across from Daphne, and he did not gloat because gloating was for people who needed the wind to be seen. Your father told you what happened, Harry said, not all of it. He can't tell you all of it without telling you things that would get him killed, but enough that you've worked out he lost completely to me, and that he's afraid, and that the fear is why he won't look at you, because you're the proof that he overreached, and a man like your father can't stand the sight of his own mistake wearing his face. He kept his voice level, almost kind. I'm not here to finish you, Draco. I'm here to offer you the same thing I offered you on the train, which you were too well trained to take then and might be wise enough to take now. A place, not behind me. I still don't have a behind, beside with the rest of them. You're the cleverest enemy I made all year and the only one who ever made me work, and that's worth more to me than your humiliation. So here's the settlement, and it's generous, and you should take it before your pride talks you out of the only good move left on your board. Draco's jaw was tight, and the terms, he said, and his voice cracked on it, a boy quoting a word he had heard the house use about Harry's table all year, the word that meant a thing was done properly. You and your terms, 3, same as everyone, Harry counted them. 1, you stop being your father's piece in this house. The Malfoy name's still yours, and it's still old, and it still means something, but it stops meaning Lucius's reach into the dungeon, because that reach is closed now and you'll only break your hand against it. 2, you bring me what you're actually good at, which is that you understand the old families from the inside in a way I never will, who's owed what, who married whom, where the real Wisengamot power sleeps. You've been raised in it since birth. That knowledge is wasted sneering by a fire. With us it's a seat at the real table. 3, he paused and gave Draco the thing that made it a settlement and not a surrender. In public, you're not a defector, you're not one of my strays. Your House Malfoy, ancient and proud, choosing to lend its weight to the strongest thing in the dungeon because that's what ancient and proud houses do. They back the winner and call it strategy. The house tells that story because I'll tell it first, and it's even true. You don't kneel, you ally. There's a difference, and I'll make sure the whole dungeon respects it, because a Malfoy who allied is worth 10 times a Malfoy who was beaten, and I'd rather have the 10. Draco Malfoy looked at the boy who had taken his house from under him, and was now offering to hand him back his dignity wrapped around a smaller throne, and Harry watched the war in him. The pride that wanted to spit against the cold Malfoy arithmetic that had been bred into him before he could walk. The arithmetic that knew an ally's seat at the winning table was worth more than a martyr's grave under the losing one. My father will hate it, Draco said at last, and it was not a refusal. It was a boy discovering with something like wonder that the thought of his father hating it was no longer the thing that governed him. Your father set you up to lose 7 brooms in front of the school, Harry said. Your father bet your name on a contest you couldn't win and then wouldn't look at you when you lost it. I think you've spent a holiday learning exactly how much your father's approval is worth, and I think the answer surprised you. He stood and held out his hand, the same hand Draco had offered on the train and Harry had refused, the symmetry deliberate and complete. Beside, not behind, take it or don't, but you're better than the man who sent those brooms, Draco. You proved it on a broom, and you can prove it again at a table. The only question is whether you'll spend the next 6 years being his disappointment or your own man. I know which one I'd choose. And Draco Malfoy, heir of an ancient house, looked at the offered hand for a long moment in the dormitory dark, and then he took it because the arithmetic was true and the wound his father had given him was real, and the boy across from him had, alone of everyone in his life, offered him a way to be more than his name instead of less. It was not friendship. It would never be friendship, but it was the last thread of the year's first great conflict tied off clean, the rival bound instead of buried, and the binding made Harry's victory total in the only way that lasts, which is the way that leaves no one alive with a reason to undo it. The Greengrass thread closed itself in February with a letter, and Daphne read it twice before she let Harry see her face. She had written to her father in November, after Lucius's pressure, the defiant letter she had promised, reminding Slytherin Greengrass that the family had outlived 11 Malfoys by being the house that did not flinch first, that Astoria deserved to inherit a name that bent to no one rather than a name that folded the moment a Malfoy raised his voice. And then she had waited through December and January for the answer, saying nothing, performing unconcern over the one thing in the world that could still move her, while her father weighed his elder daughter's defiance against 3 centuries of careful hiding. The answer came on greengrass paper in Cyrus's exact hand, and Daphne laid it face up on the window table between them when she had finished it, transparent the way she was only ever transparent with him. Harry read it. Slytherin Greengrass wrote that he had received, in the same fortnight, 2 letters that had taught him something about his daughter. The first was hers, which had angered him, because it told a careful man his careful counsel had been refused. The second was a second letter from Lucius Malfoy, warm, fulsome, withdrawing entirely the cool concern of the first, full of graceful regret at having misjudged a harmless schoolyard friendship. And Cyrus, who was no fool, had set the 2 letters side by side and read what they told him together, which was that his daughter had been right and he had been wrong, that a Malfoy did not withdraw a threat out of warmth, that Lucius had been made to retreat, that the 11-year-old his daughter had allied with had somehow faced down the house of Malfoy and won, and that Daphne had seen the strength in it when her own father had seen only the danger. I have spent my life, Cyrus wrote, keeping this family out of the lightning, and I taught you that this was the whole of our doctrine, and you have reminded me at 12 that I had it backwards. Neutrality was never hiding. It was refusing to kneel. Your grandmother knew it. I had forgotten and grown timid and called the timidity wisdom. You did not forget. You have allied us not with a king but with the one power in Britain that bends to none, which is precisely where a Greengrass belongs, and where I to my shame had not the nerve to stand. The letter closed. Tell your Mr. Potter that the house of Greengrass stands with him, openly, with its name and its old debts and its votes, and that it does so not because he frightened us into it, but because my daughter saw clearly what her father did not. And tell him that when Astoria comes to Hogwarts, she will arrive as the sister of the girl who reminded an old family what it was, which is the finest inheritance I could leave either of you. Harry set the letter down, and for a moment neither of them said anything, because some things did not need the ledger and some victories did not need a word. He used Astoria to try to move me in November, Daphne said at last, her voice steady and low. And now Astoria comes to school in 2 years as the sister of the girl who put the spine back in the family. He's not just withdrawing the pressure, Harry. He's making House Greengrass an open ally, name, votes, the old debts half the Wisengamot owes us. That's not a neutral family keeping its head down anymore. That's a great house declaring for the first time in 300 years that it stands with something. She looked up. Lucius tried to break us through my father, and instead he's handed us the most respected neutral name in Britain, openly committed, because he overreached and my father is clever enough to read a retreat for what it is. Your father's a good man who mistook caution for principle, and you corrected him without ever once being unkind about it, Harry said. That's the thing I'll remember from this letter, not the votes, though the votes change everything. Fact that you went to war with your own father over the family's soul and won it back for them, and he had the grace to say so in writing. He almost smiled. Greengrass stands with us, openly. The keystone isn't just holding now. It's load-bearing for the whole Wisengamot. Lucius spent a campaign trying to take you from me and bought me the open allegiance of the one family whose neutrality everyone in Britain has trusted for 3 centuries. There's no better spent enemy gold in the history of the world. There's one thing he didn't buy, Daphne said, and the glass stayed on the iron, but something moved behind it. He didn't buy back the part where my father, for the first time in my life, is proud of me for the thing I actually am instead of the thing the family needed me to be. She folded the letter with precise care and put it away. I came into this alliance to be a player. I'm leaving the year having handed my whole house its nerve back. I didn't expect that. I want it on the record that I didn't expect it and that it's the second best thing this year has given me. And the first, Harry asked, though he half knew. I'll tell you on the last night, Daphne said. Some things you save for the last night. And she turned a page of the ledger and would not say more, and Harry let her keep it, because he had learned over the year that the things Daphne Greengrass saved were the things she meant most. The institution proved itself the week after, in the small way that matters more than the grand ones, because a power that can only win battles is a faction and a power that can settle disputes is a government. It was a quarrel between 2 third-years over a debt, a Quidditch wager gone sour, the kind of thing that in the old dungeon would have festered into a feud, or been settled by whoever had the louder friends, or dragged before the prefects to be judged on the basis of whose family mattered more. Instead, both boys came of their own accord to the window table, because the window table had become the place where the house took its grievances now, and they laid the quarrel in front of Harry and Daphne and asked for a ruling, and the asking was the whole victory, because it meant the house had stopped believing that power was the only arbiter and started believing in something it had never had before, which was fairness it could count on. Harry did not rule. He turned to Daphne because the house needed to learn that the seat had 2 chairs, and Daphne heard both boys out and consulted the ledger, where the debt and its history were written down in her good hand, because everything in the house was written down now. And she gave a ruling that split the difference exactly along the line of what each boy had actually promised, and named a way for the loser to pay that left him his dignity. And bound both of them to it not by force but by the simple fact that the whole house would now remember the terms and hold them to it. Both boys left satisfied, which in a dispute is the rarest outcome there is, and the dungeon watched it happen and understood, a little more deeply than the week before, what it was living inside of now. That, Harry said when they had gone, is the part that lasts. Anyone can take a house. Holding one means the house stops needing you to hold it, means the fairness is in the walls and the ledger and the habit, not just in us. The day 2 third-years bring you their quarrel instead of their fists, you've stopped being a faction and started being a place. We could leave tomorrow and the habit would hold for a year before it frayed. He looked at the green windows. That's what we're building toward, not a kingdom that falls when the king does, an institution that outlives us. Because the war's coming and we might not last it, and the one thing worth leaving behind is a Slytherin that remembers, after we're gone, that it once belonged to itself and could again. The house recognized them on a night in February, and it was not a vote because Slytherin did not vote, and it was not a coronation, because a coronation can be witnessed and refused. It was older than either, and Harry had learned of it from Nott, who read 3 languages and had forgotten more about old magic than the fire would learn before its OWLS, and who came to Harry in late January grave with what he had found in the house's oldest books. There's a thing the house does, Nott said, or did, before everyone forgot it was real and started thinking it was a story. Slytherin House isn't only a dormitory and a banner. Salazar built something into the foundations, into the stone, into the lake magic, into the green light itself, a kind of old recognition, a thing that wakes when the house has a true head, when enough of its members in their own hearts acknowledge one. It can't be claimed, it can't be faked, it only answers to a thing that's actually true. His eyes were bright with the find. The books say it last woke a very long time ago. They say you feel it when it does. They say the green light changes. He looked at Harry. I think it's stirring, Harry. I've felt it in the common room these last weeks. The house has a head for the first time in centuries, and the old magic in the walls is starting to know it, and I think the night it fully wakes, you should be there for it, and so should Daphne, because it isn't only you the house is acknowledging. It's the 2 of you. I've never seen it acknowledged 2. The books don't even have a word for 2. It woke on a night when the whole house was gathered, not for any ceremony, simply present, the dungeon full and warm and at ease in a way it had not been in living memory. The little ones safe, the neutrals unafraid, Draco at a table lending House Malfoy's weight, Pansy sharp and home, Zabini bored and loyal, Tracy at the warm heart of it, Flint and Farley in the upper years treating the first years as principals, the whole strange new body of the house breathing together. And Harry felt it begin the way you feel a tide turn, a vast slow attention coming up out of the stone beneath his feet, out of the black lake beyond the windows, out of 1,000 years of green light, something ancient and patient and baroque past any human making, the deep old magic of a founder who had built his cunning into the bones of the place, rising now to look at the 2 children who had given his house, after centuries of being a faction of frightened heirs, the one thing it had forgotten it could be, which was a single living thing that belonged to itself. The green light changed. It deepened all at once throughout the common room, from the pale underwater green of every other night to something richer and older and almost gold at its edges. The color of deep water with a sun somewhere very far above it, and the whole house went still, every conversation stopping at once, every face turning, every student feeling the thing in the stone wake and reach and settle. And it settled on Harry, and it settled on Daphne beside him, and it did not crown them. Because the old magic of Salazar Slytherin did not crown, it recognized, the way deep water recognizes the moon that moves it, and for one long, impossible breath the entire house of Slytherin stood in light the color of a drowned sunrise and knew, in the place below, knowing that it had a head again, and that the head was two, and that the two were true. Then it faded, the gold sinking back out of the green, the light returning to its ordinary underwater pallor, and the house exhaled altogether, and no one said what had happened because there were no words the house had kept for it, but everyone in the dungeon understood that something had been settled that could no longer be unsettled, and that they had each in the place below chosen, and that the choosing had been answered by a thing far older than any of them, which does not answer lies. Two, Daphne said very quietly beside him in the fading gold. It even did it for two, not said the books don't have a word for two. Then were the word, Harry said, bend to no king, the house just told us it meant it. And he looked at her in the last of the old light, and the thing that had passed between them on the first night, the smallest thread of warmth under all the cold arithmetic, stood fully revealed for one breath as what it had always quietly been, which was the truest alliance in the castle, and the one neither king had been able to break, because neither king had understood that you cannot break a thing two people choose every single day on purpose. The year ended as Harry had always known it would, with the thing behind the turban making its move and losing. He learned the shape of it afterward in pieces from Snape's grim silences and Dumbledore's careful nothings, and the simple fact of an empty chair at the staff table where a stammering professor had sat. The thing in the castle had gone at last for the stone it hunted on a night near the end of June, and the old man's plan had been waiting for it, and whatever happened in the dark beneath the third floor, the creature that wore Quirrell had failed and fled, broken and bodiless and emptier than it had come. Having spent a whole year in a school full of children and gained from it precisely nothing, it had hunted a stone and lost it. It had probed the boy who lived 3 times and been refused 3 times. It had offered power and truth in the name of a traitor, and the child had taken none of it and kept the secret anyway, holding the knife to the end and never once spending it. Lord Voldemort left Hogwarts that June with less than he had arrived with, and the only being in the castle who had truly profited from his year-long presence was the 11-year-old who had turned the Dark Lord's own hunt into the leverage that secured a house. And Dumbledore at the leaving feast found his gentler words at last, as he had promised, spoke warmly and at length of the 4 houses of unity of a year survived, and said not one syllable about parliaments under the lake, and let his eyes rest once briefly on the Slytherin table and on the boy at the new center of it, and inclined his head a quarter-inch that no one else in the hall would have read as anything at all. Harry read it. It said, I see you, and I was wrong, and my door is open, and I know you will not walk through it, and we will do this dance for 7 years, and both of us already know it. Harry returned the quarter-inch. It said the same thing back. 2 players, acknowledging across a crowded hall that they had taken each other's measure and found it large, and that the real game had not ended but merely paused for a summer. Harry gathered the block one last time before they scattered, on the second to last night, not at the window table now, but in the heart of the common room, because the thing he had to say belonged to the whole house, and the whole house had become theirs to say it too. They came, the nucleus and the little ones, Pansy and Draco lending the old names, Waite, Flint and Farley from the upper years, Folly with her cup half won and a real one ahead, not rested and clear-eyed, Zabini affecting boredom and missing nothing, Tracy at the warm center where she always sat, Daphne at Harry's side. And Harry did not give them a victory speech, because victory speeches end things, and he needed them to understand that nothing had ended. We took a house this year, he said. I want you to enjoy that for exactly as long as it takes me to finish this sentence, because tomorrow it stops being the thing we did and becomes the thing we have to keep, and keeping is harder than taking and longer and far less exciting, which is precisely why most people who take things lose them. He let the room settle. So before we go home, I want to tell you the truth about what comes next, because you've earned it, and because a thing built on a lie about how hard it'll be falls apart the first hard winter. Here is the next 6 years plainly. He counted it out, the way he counted everything, so that each of them would carry the same map home. Year 2, the block stops being a Slytherin thing and becomes a Hogwarts thing. Quietly, the way Tracy's been doing it all year, neutral children in every house who are tired of being told they have to choose a side. Dumbledore walled us into the dungeon with one speech this autumn. We spend next year teaching the rest of the castle that the wall was his and not ours, one frightened Ravenclaw and one overlooked Hufflepuff at a time. Year 3 and 4, the names start to matter. Greengrass stands with us openly now, and where Greengrass stands, the old neutral houses follow, and Draco's knowledge of who owes what in the Wisengamot stops being dinner-table gossip and starts being a map of where the real power in Britain actually sleeps. By the time we sit our OWLS, the families that sent their children to this house will have learned that the Potter block is not a schoolyard game, but the first stirring of a third force in the country itself, neither the Ministry S, nor the Old Man S, nor the thing in the darks. He paused, and somewhere in there, years 5 or 6, the war comes back. The thing that wore a turban this year fled emptier than it came, but it fled, it didn't die, and it does not forget an hour, and it does not forgive a child who refused it 3 times in a corridor. It will return whole, and Britain will tear itself in half again, exactly the way it did the year my parents died, and every one of you will be handed aside like a coat that's already been bought for you. The room had gone very still. The little ones had stopped breathing. He gave them the rest of it gently, because it was the part that mattered most. And when that day comes, Harry said, the whole reason we built this, the ledger, the doctrine, the wall, the green light going gold, is so that not one of you has to put the coat on. So that when the ministry comes demanding your loyalty, and the dark comes demanding your blood, and the old man comes demanding your courage, there's a third place to stand, large enough by then to be real, that says what your families have only ever dared to whisper. Bend to no king. We are not building an army for either side. We are building the one thing in Britain strong enough to keep its own people out of both armies, to look at 2 storms and refuse to be the lightning rod for either. That is the long game. It started in a cupboard by lamplight, and it ends, if we're good and lucky and never once lie to each other, with a generation of witches and wizards who got to choose for themselves in a war that gave their parents no choice at all. He looked around the firelit room at the strange new body of the house he had made. 6 years, a war, a house full of children to keep alive through it. That's what we're going home to get ready for. Enjoy your summer. We'll need it. For a moment no one spoke, and then Theodore Knott, who had chosen first and bled for it and been kept, stood up and said the thing the house had been feeling and had no words for. My father told me the strong protect no one but themselves, he said, and that anyone who says different is selling you a leash. He was wrong, and this year proved him wrong in front of all of us, and I'd like the record to show that the first thing the House of Slytherin ever did under a true head was keep its weakest members safe instead of spending them. Whatever the rest of Britain thinks the snakes are, that's what we actually were this year. I'll go home on that. It's the first thing in my life I've been proud to belong to. And the house, which did not cheer, which had never in its history cheered for anything, did the thing it did instead, which was to go utterly still and let the truth of it settle over the whole room at once. And in the stillness Harry felt the old magic stir again, faint and approving, deep in the stone beneath them, as if Salazar's ancient cunning recognized that his house had, after 1,000 years, finally been used for the one thing he had built its loyalty to do, which was to keep its own alive in a world that wanted to spend them. Snape found him afterward in the emptying corridor and said only, "You told them the war is coming. It was not a question. They'd rather know," Harry said. "Frightened people who know what's coming sleep better than comfortable people who'll be ambushed by it. You taught me that in your way. A clever man's wary attention, renewed every day, beats a fool's peace. I taught you nothing. You arrived knowing it, which is the only thing about you I have never forgiven and never will." But there was no heat in it now, only the durable, wary regard of a man who had decided, against every instinct, where he stood. "Go home, Potter. Keep your head down over the summer, which you will not do, and send to me before you act, which you will. We have 6 years in a war, as you say. I find I would rather spend them with you on my side of the board than mourn you as a waste of your mother's eyes." He turned to go, robe snapping, and paused. "The thing in the corridor, it will come back for you specifically before the others. You refused it 3 times, and it does not forget. When it does send to me first, I knew it longer than you, and I have my own accounts with it unpaid." And then he was gone into the dark. The third force in the dungeon turned quiet ally, the last piece of the long game's foundation set. The dungeon was nearly empty on the last night, the trunks packed, the house scattering to 100 manors and cottages across Britain, and Harry and Daphne sat at the window table where it had all begun, the green light ordinary again, the ledger between them, its country grown until it filled most of the book, 41 names, every one of them accounted for, every debt and favor and fear of the whole house written down in a stationer's exercise book that no one had ever thought to search. "First year," Daphne said. She turned a page of the country slowly. "We set out to take a house. We took it. We refused 2 kings and turned a third and made an enemy into an ally and woke a thing in the walls that hasn't woken in centuries, and we're 11 and there are 6 years left." She looked up. "I want to ask you something, and I want the true answer, the first night answer, not the speech. Was it worth it? Tobin's terror and not sleepless weeks, and the night you came up the stair gray and shaking, was the house worth what it cost the people in it?" Harry was quiet a moment, because she had asked the one question that mattered and deserved more than reflex. "No," he said at last, "not the house. The house isn't worth one frightened child's bad week. If I ever tell you the house was worth it, you have term 1 and you should use it, because I'll have become the thing I built all this to refuse." He looked at the green windows. "But that was never what it was for, and you know it, because you helped me build it for the other thing. It was never about owning Slytherin. It was about proving to 40 children who'd been taught they had to choose between a Dark Lord's leftovers and an old man's army, that there's a third thing, that you can refuse the powerful and not be crushed, that you can belong to each other instead of to a king. Tobin came back, not sleeps, folly flies. 40 children are going home this summer who arrived in September believing their only choices were which master to kneel to, and they're leaving knowing there's a way to kneel to no one in live." He met her eyes. That was worth it, not the kingdom, the proof. And the proof only holds as long as we keep it true, which is the whole of the next 6 years and the whole of the war after and probably the whole of our lives. He almost smiled. I never wanted to be a king, Daphne. I wanted to build the one thing in Britain that doesn't need one. We did. That's year one. Daphne looked at him across the table where two cold children had struck a cold bargain 9 months ago and become, without either of them ever once saying the word, the only warm thing in each other's careful lives. And she did the thing she had done only 3 times all year, let the glass come off the iron, one last time, earned and meant. When you came up that stair shaking, she said, and told me you'd held knives to all 3 of them and that you'd never have walked down there if you hadn't known I'd be at the top, that's the thing I'll keep from this year. Not the house, not the green light going gold, that. Her voice was steady and low. 2 people who are warm to no one, who are warm to each other, who tell each other the true thing when the lie would be easier. Who hold the door open every single time it gets real, because holding it open is the only way to know the other one's choosing to stay. She closed the ledger on the country of names. Both kings looked for the weakness in what we built all year, and neither of them ever found it, because neither of them could imagine that the strongest thing in the dungeon wasn't the block or the secret or the leverage. It was this. 2 people who chose each other on purpose every day and could not be bought apart at any price, because the price was never about money or power. It was about whether either of us would ever lie to the other to win, and neither of us ever did, not once all year. She held his eyes. Keep doing that, Potter. The day you stop, I'm gone and the whole thing falls, because the whole thing was always standing on it. But you won't stop. That's the other thing I'll keep. I've watched you all year, and you'll do a great many cold things before we're done, and you'll never once lie to me, and that's how I'll always know which of the things you do are right. That's the plan, Harry said, and it was the same answer he had given her on the first night, and it meant something larger now, and they both knew it, and neither of them cheapened it by saying so. They sat a while longer in the green light, the last 2 in the dungeon, the ledger between them and the black lake beyond the windows, and a whole castle gone quiet above them. And outside the deep windows, very far up, where the surface of the lake met a sky neither of them could see, the long midsummer evening was sliding toward a night the almanacs had marked. A night when the moon would pass across the last of the light and blot it for an hour, a small eclipse, the kind that comes and goes and changes nothing and reminds everyone, for the length of it, that even the largest lights can be quietly covered by a smaller thing that knows exactly where to stand. They're going to come back for us, you know, Daphne said into the green dark, both of them, older and angrier and far more careful than they were this year. Year one was the easy one because none of them believed an 11-year-old could really start the game. They believe it now. I'm counting on it, Harry said, and the boy who had walked into the castle knowing exactly what he intended to become looked, in the green underwater light, entirely at peace with the 6 years and the war and the whole long patient game still ahead of him. Let them come back, we'll be older too. We'll have the whole house behind us and the old magic in the walls and a ledger no one can read and a partnership no one can break. They had their whole lives to learn this board and they still didn't see us coming. He stood and offered her his hand across the table, equal as she had first offered hers to him, and she took it, and the green light lay over the 2 of them like deep water over a thing the sun had not yet reached. We've got 6 years to get ready, and a war to outlast, and a house full of children to keep alive through it. We started in a cupboard by lamplight in a window table under a lake, and we ended the year as the one power in Britain that answers to no king. He almost smiled and for once let it finish. Master of the Snakes, the house is calling me. They've got it half right. He looked at her. Masters, the books don't have a word for 2, will be the word. And the 2 of them walked out of the empty dungeon together, the boy who belonged to no one and the ice queen who had bent to no king, equal and cold and warm only to each other, into the long summer and the longer game beyond it, while far above the silent lake the small eclipse came on and the great light dimmed for its hour, and the patient dark that had learned this year exactly where to stand, settled in to wait for the seasons to turn it back toward war. Chapter 7 End.